Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto born in World of the Olympians and stay with Fem Kyuubi, so do 4 blue hearts comment. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. Prologue. I blow myself up. Is this thing on? Yeah. Oh good. Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, former member of the ninja village known as Village Hidden in the Leaves. I suppose I see. Old explain what the Leaf Village is to you, but all you need to know for now is that I learned most of what I know about fighting from there. I'm getting off topic, you're probably more interested in the actual adventure in this story. I suppose a good day to begin would probably be the day Pervy Sage decided to try adding a couple of new things to my training regime. Pervy Sage, otherwise known as Jiraiya the Toad Sage, had taken me from the village hidden in the leaves to be trained. Unlike most of my normal training that I would have gotten from the village hidden in the leaves, it was far more hands-on. And was far more difficult if your stamina wasn't able to keep up with it. Trust me, even a stamina freak like me continually wound up lying on my bed each night wondering how I had made it back to my room. We were currently in the city of Higurashi, a city a good ways outside of Wave Country. He actually suggested it early in the morning, over breakfast if I remember right. I was so shocked. I nearly spewed my food on him in a rather comedic fashion. Luckily for me, I was able to swallow my food before I spoke. You want to try what? Pervy Sage sighed. I think the best hot we have at creating this technique is to draw on the kyuubi's chakra, in bulk. So we're going to test just how much power you can take and can control later today. It will be a learning experience, for both of us. I sat back, thinking it over. The technique that Pervy Sage had told me about sounded highly dangerous to use for any normal ninja. But, with the kyuubi's chakra powering it, it just might work. I grinned at him, a feeling of excitement coming over me. When do we get started? Pervy Sage chuckled, shaking his head. We'll have to do it later this evening, after your standard training. You seem to draw on the kyuubi's power best whenever you're a bit more tired from your usual activities. We'll also have to make sure that we make sure to keep our training away from everyone else. Just in case something goes wrong, for their safety and our own. I nodded to myself. Pervy Sage was still talking for a little bit, explaining the different exercises that we'd be going over. I'm not really sure what half the things were. I was too busy thinking on how I was going to draw out more of the kyuubi's chakra. It was easy enough when I was asking for rent on any other occasion. But taking more could be potentially dangerous. Of course, don't let it be said that I shy away from a challenge. In fact, I was pretty sure that I was going to have fun trying to figure this out. It would only be later that I would look back and realize how stupid I am. As it was, I followed Pervy Sage out of the hotel we were staying at, my eyes quickly taking in my surroundings. Pervy Sage had kept me locked in my room for the past 2 days and had told me to read some books he had left for me. Since I had been exhausted from the previous months of strenuous activities, I felt that a few days of rest might actually be good for me. I'm sure that my friends would laugh if they heard that. Me, actually doing what a teacher told me to do. And on top of that, reading books for reasons other than for fun would probably end up making them die laughing. As it was, I did actually learn some pretty cool stuff, but why he wanted me to read books on science I don't know. Did you read any of the books I left for you? Pervy Sage as we walked down the street. As I nodded, a small grin crossed his face. Good. Now follow me. He turned into a quiet little restaurant, which surprised me a bit. I was half expecting him to drag me off to one of his normal stopping points for research. We walked in, got a table for 2, and were quickly seated. Still confused, I gave Pervy Sage a confused look. He had a serious look on his face, one he only had during serious training and fights. Naruto, this is an important exercise, so pay close attention. I leaned forward, waiting expectantly for him to explain what the training was. However, he remained silent, acting casual as we were asked for our orders. As soon as our waitress had left, he glanced at me. How many men are currently in the room? I blinked. What? How many men are in the room? Okay, that's not exactly what I was expecting. Heck, it wasn't even connected to any of the books I had read. I turned around, trying to get a look at the people around us. Only to be stopped by Pervy Sage. Without looking, I gave him a frustrated look. How am I supposed to know that without looking? Pervy Sage shook his head. Quote, a good ninja takes in his surroundings the moment he enters a room. You can never really know when someone is an enemy in our profession. You have to be cautious, and aware of everything. My expression turned into one of surprise. I hadn't really thought of anything like that, though that didn't really explain what that had to do with the books I had read. Grumbling to myself, I closed my eyes, trying to remember how many people had been on the room when we came in. Unsure of who was a guy and who was a girl, I threw out a wild guess. 4. Pervy Sage shook his head. How many employees are working right now? I don't know. How many couples? I don't know. What color was our waitress's eyes? I don't know. I was beginning to get frustrated with his questions. It felt like we were just going in circles. Pervy Sage sighed. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We spent the next half of the day just doing that exercise. I got a bit better, now that I understood what I was supposed to be looking for. I still missed more than half of the questions, but I was certain that I was noticing a lot of the things I hadn't before. Not that I really paid much attention in the first place. But that was besides the point. Shortly after lunch, we went outside of the village we were staying in for strenuous combat practice. I'd been getting a lot better thanks to Pervy Sage's help. Not that I planned on telling him that yet. He'd probably believe he hadn't taught me right because we hadn't visited the hot springs enough. Not that I would particularly hate going to the hot springs. After all, they are relaxing. And I'm still a guy. Finally, as the sun began to fall behind the mountains, Pervy Sage decided that it was time to prepare ourselves. I tried not to cry out in relief. My chakra reserves were drained. And I was pretty sure that if we had continued to train, I wouldn't have been able to go through with the next part of our training. Then again, it was only due to my amazing stamina that I was able to keep moving for a bit. We moved a bit further away, towards a more barren area. Settling in, we set ourselves up. Within moments, we'd set up a perimeter to help us try to control the kyuubi's chakra. As I worked on the perimeter, Pervy Sage had a strange-looking frog pop out of his mouth. Strange meaning its upper body was a frog, while its lower half was a scroll. I'm not joking. The scroll opened up with words and everything. After a moment of talking to the frog and fiddling with some of the words on it, he turned to me. I need to see your necklace. Why? I asked, confused by the request. The necklace he was referring to was the one that used to belong to the first Hokage, and that I had won from Tsunade, the first Hokage's granddaughter. It was my prized possession. And I didn't go anywhere without it. Pervy Sage had never asked me to take it off either, which is why I was confused by his request. The necklace is designed to keep the kyuubi's energy suppressed. Taking it off will help us release the kyuubi's energy. It should speed up the process, and help us achieve our goal earlier, he stated. I bit my lip in thought. I didn't really want to take it off. But if it was inhibiting my training, I didn't think twice as I took it off and handed the necklace to Pervy Sage. I needed to get stronger to bring back Sasuke, and nothing would stop me from fulfilling that promise. I would later reflect on that moment as the stupidest thing I've ever done. I'm being serious, the stupidest thing, and that my opinion of being able to make unstoppable promises was wrong. Anything can be stopped, even my unbreakable promises were no match for what was going to happen. Are you ready? I nodded. All right, let's try this out. He placed his hand on my seal. A strange feeling of dread and excitement rushing through me. Something big was coming. He gave it a small twist, like he was partially opening a jar, and took a step back. I looked at myself, waiting for the rush of chakra that I was accustomed to. Nothing happened. I looked at Pervy Sage, unsure of whether or not it had worked. I was just about to ask if I was supposed to feel anything when it happened. That old, familiar energy began to rush into me. Now, I've felt the kyuubi's chakra flow into me before, but this was different. Like the difference between a rock and a boulder, bad comparison. But I can better explain the size than the feel. Almost at once, I felt angry, similar to how I usually feel whenever I use the kyuubi's chakra, only it felt like it was growing. After a second, The chakra actually began to seep out of me and form around me in a fox shape. I was a bit surprised, unaware that this happened when I got a certain amount of chakra, My attention quickly shifted to another fact. The energy was still gushing out. I growled at a second tail of chakra formed. I could feel the kyuubi's presence growing in the back of my head, but I could also hear Pervy Sage speaking calmly in front of me, his voice just barely getting over the sound of my blood in my ears. "You're doing great, Naruto, just hang on." Easy for him to say, he wasn't. The one with an enraged demon sealed in him trying to through him. Now I've been angry before, I've been pissed off before, but this was more rage than I was usually used to. I was pretty sure I was seeing a couple of spots in my vision, though that may have just been me feeling tense. I could almost hear the kyuubi's voice speaking to me now. And the energy was still coming. I clawed at the ground in a feral manner as the third tail slowly extended. I wanted to destroy everything. I no longer knew why I felt like that, I just wanted to see its destruction. A part of me knew better, the rational part of me. And tried to rein myself in, but I was pretty much fighting a losing battle. The anger was so satisfying, my hunger for power felt loosened, while at the same time suddenly wanting more of it. "Naruto, are you still okay?" Despite my enraged state, I managed a nod. "Do you want to continue?" I nodded again. "All right, be careful." More power rushed into me. This time though, the energy wasn't the only thing to come through. Almost like an itch in the back of my head, I could feel the kyuubi's presence pushing through. It was so filled with rage, and so much power. I wrote it whispering words I couldn't understand, not that I cared at the time. I couldn't really think all that straight due to the fact that I was seeing red, more angry than I had ever felt in my life. Though that might just have been the kyuubi's chakra I was seeing. Then the kyuubi decided to take over. I don't know why I remember what happened next so vividly, but it was something that would change my life as well as haunt me. I saw through my own eyes, feeling like I was trespassing in someone else's mind and body. I saw Pervy Sage step back, realizing that something was horribly wrong. I wanted to yell at him to run. That he was in danger. But nothing came out, I had lost all control. The kyuubi looked around, flexing my hands almost experimentally. I felt its nervousness, its apprehension, which confused me. What on earth could possibly make the kyuubi apprehensive? And then it did something I never thought possible, or would have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Kyuubi went through a series of hand seals before slamming my hands on the ground. Watching in surprise and amazement, I watched as a large group of seals spread around myself, the kyuubi in a manner similar to the summoning technique. Although, the seals were completely off. I mean, since when is there a horseshoe-shaped kanji? Pervy Sage seemed to think that something was wrong though. Because he began going through a series of hand seals himself. I can only guess what he was trying to do, because I never saw what he did. The kyuubi's energy disappeared into the seas that were now surrounding me. For a brief second, I thought it was over. Then, the seals rapidly rushed from off the ground and across my skin. In another split second, a burning sensation came across every place that had a seal on it. It was agonizing, like every part of my body was being jabbed with a hot needle. Then the energy constricted around me, in such a way that I could practically feel the air in and around me being twisted and compressed. I grabbed my throat, trying desperately to breathe. Then, well, I exploded. And everything went black. I was stuck in darkness. Now, I'm not sure what I can really tell you about limbo. I'm not sure how to describe it besides it being constantly too hot and too cold at the same time. I'm sure that in normal circumstances, that would make me feel just right. Then again, I've never been through much normal stuff in my life. Now that I think about it, there is another thing I can tell you about my stay in limbo. A lot of people think that limbo is like own kind of empty space that fills the void between dimensions. They're pretty much right, but also wrong. Limbo is probably empty when people aren't there, but it's the whole opposite thing. Once you enter limbo, it's like you aren't in limbo, but you also fill limbo. All of the information I'd ever learned was there, constantly replaying over and over again. It's like my mind was bored, and had nothing better to do. And decided to torture me by replaying every moment I'd ever lived. There were even memories that I didn't realize that I knew. In fact, the first memories that were brought up were mostly sounds. At first they were muffled, two particular voices could be heard a lot. I listened, feeling relaxed by their voices for a while before I made the connection. The voices I was hearing were my parents. As time went on, their voices became more distinct. My mom sounded like me, impulsive, headstrong, and occasionally shouting something that sounded like when I yelled, "Believe it." My father on the other hand usually sounded focused, soldier-like I guess. Yet, at times when he was with my mother and Pervy Sage when he was around he sounded kind, and loving. He spoke of mine such a way that I knew he wanted and loved me. Then, I saw my parents' death. I watched a masked man take my mother, only to later see her crying face as my father left. Then, I watched with my small, barely seeing eyes as my parents fought and sealed the kyuubi. I even got to hear the decree that the third Hokage made, the one where my father asked me to be seen as a hero, as well as keep the kyuubi a secret from the kids my age. I can tell you that didn't work as well as he thought it would. I watched myself growing up, remembering things from books I didn't remember reading. I remembered my time in Konoha as a genin. The good and the bad. I relived my moments with Haku, the promise to protect my precious people and follow my own ninja path. I felt the battles with Kiba, Neji, and Gaara. Reliving the pressure of proving myself to them, and everyone else. I watched myself lose Sasuke and swear to bring him back. And then I watched the final part of my life, the kyuubi taking over and sticking us into limbo. I watched the memories over and over again, thinking that would be pretty much all I'd ever see while I was stuck there. I guess it never occurred to me that there could be other people stuck in limbo. For the longest time, there was nothing. It was just me and my thoughts, not even the kyuubi to keep me company. Then, my mind seemed to bump into an object of some sorts in limbo. Curious, I reached out to it. As I touched the object in limbo, I jumped in shock as the object suddenly reached back. After a moment of confusion, I realized what had happened. There was someone else stuck in limbo. And whoever it was just as curious about me as I was of them. Now, I had been stuck in limbo for who knows how long. I was excited to know that someone else was out there. However, as time went on, my thoughts turned from excitement to confusion. The other person seemed alright, not really dangerous with any intent to harm me or anything like that. But there was just something off about their presence. There was just something familiar about them. Like a long-lost friend you couldn't remember the name of or something. The only problem was that we couldn't exactly talk to one another. Limbo doesn't really carry sound. In other words, we knew that the other person was there, but talking was pretty much out of the question. That was almost worse than having no one there. Luckily, I'm not the sort of person to give up. With a bit of time and a bit of experimenting, I found that we could send images. Well, it was more like I could send memories. And since I had remembered more of my life, I was more able to send them to the other mind easier than they could to me. During our conversations, I sent memories of the Leaf Village, my friends, trying to keep it as positive as possible. In return I was shown strange images of places that couldn't have been possible, but were. There were strange words on some of the buildings I didn't understand. The OT. Her person tried to explain a little bit, but wasn't really able to bring up any good images to help explain, so I just let it go. I was shown the faces of some people, the other person's friends I suppose. They seemed happy, although I could tell the other person felt really sad as they remembered them. I was shown a camp, where some people known as halflings, the children of some people called Olympians, could go to train. I wasn't sure what an Olympian was, but it kinda reminded me of the Ninja Academy, and I told them so, showing them an image of the academy. I'm not 100% sure. But I think they might have been laughing at me. Why? I'm not sure. I never even got a chance to ask, because their presence suddenly disappeared with a cry. And once again, I was alone, lost in my thoughts again. I knew that if I was stuck here alone again, that I would more than likely go crazy. I had been alone for too long, and wanted out. Now, almost like an answer to my plea, I felt the tug at my mind. I'm not sure how I was pulled out, but it felt like my mind was physically yanked out of my memories. My mind, which had felt loose and free as it had wandered about, was violently reconnected with my body. And then I fell. It was disorienting, suddenly falling after being suspended in limbo for so long. The suddenly lurch made me feel suddenly sick, until after a moment of falling, I felt myself connect with the ground beneath me. The landing wasn't too bad, just a bit painful. I groaned softly, feeling sore all over. There was a pain shooting through my head, a revolting smell not helping in the least. While painful, wasn't as bad as some of the pains I remembered suffering through. Trust me when I say I remember only too well. After groaning a bit, I tried to open my eyes. Tried being the key word. Just the small amount of light that I could see blinded me, renewing the intense pain, though now more focused into my eyes. From what I could tell, it wasn't actually that bright out. Plus, if my nose wasn't lying to me, it was probably going to rain soon. Grimacing, I pushed myself up. I was quickly reminded that just before I had gone into limbo, I had gone through our rigorous training session with Pervy Sage. Pushing through the pain, I took a slow step forwards. Unable to see, I didn't notice the bottle until I stepped on it and was backpedaling fast. After a few steps though, my backside slammed into something, a metallic wall of some sorts. It only made my headache hurt even more, as a hollow ring resounded through the area. I silently questioned whether or not Cammy hated me as I tried to take a couple deep breaths. Keeping my back against the metal wall, I tried to open my eyes again. The pain was excruciating, but I bore it as my sight slowly came back to me. I took a look around, unsure of whether or not I was hallucinating. It was some of the images I'd seen from Limbo. There were buildings covered in glass that reached into the sky, some probably taller than the Hokage monument. I watched the crowds of people walking the sides of the streets, while metal beasts rolled through the middle of the streets as though they were oblivious to the people. Groaning, I noticed that the metal wall I was leaning against was actually a box of some sort with a multitude of trash. I grimaced. Well now, that explains the smell. With a small sigh I pushed myself upright again. I was standing in some alleyway, isolated from the crowd and beasts. On either side, the crowds and beasts filled the street, which meant that it would probably be a bit more difficult to blend in if anyone decided to question me. In the alley, a few other people sat around, not really paying much attention to me. Except for this one guy who was probably a few years older than me, who was looking at me with almost a hungry expression. Creepy. I glanced around again, trying to find something to give me some help. As I looked around, I noticed a piece of paper that was lying on the ground next to my surprisingly bare foot. I quickly picked it up, hoping to find something of value. Looking over the paper, I quickly became frustrated. The symbols on the paper were meaningless to me. I went over a few basic training methods that I knew of that Pervy Sage had taught me about code decrypting, but nothing worked. The code was simply too difficult to decipher. Then something strange happened. The letters began to move. Now, this had never happened to me before, so I was reasonably shocked as I dropped the paper and let out a small shout. Realizing that I had attracting some attention, I grinned nervously at them. One of the older men sitting in the alley grinned. From where I stood, I could tell he was missing some teeth, and that those teeth were in serious need of brushing. First-time user. What? I asked, shaking my head in confusion. My ears were still ringing from the box, so I wasn't sure if I'd heard the man correctly. The man just huckled as though he knew something that I didn't. Drugs, man. Is this your first time? I tried to smile. What the heck is that? After a second, I just shrugged. Don't worry, it'll get easier to handle as you use it more. The man said, a throaty laugh escaping his lips. The younger man in the alley gave me such a curious look that I couldn't help but stare back. There was something strange about him. Like his face was shimmering under an illusionary jutsu. With a small amount of surprise, I took a step backwards. Hearing a small crumpling noise, I looked down. Noticing the paper under my foot again, I stared down at it. For a moment, nothing happened. The symbols remained as they were. Then, they began to move again. This time, I stood still, watching in amazement as the words began to reassemble themselves. Grinning in triumph, I picked up the paper again. The symbols had rearranged themselves into understandable kanji. Reading through some of the things on it, I quickly found the kanji were written in a left-to-right fashion rather than the usual up-and-down fashion I was used to. Adapting to the new reading fashion, I skimmed through what was written. It didn't really have much that I could use. But there was something that I realized was helpful. In the top left corner, was two words that were probably the most helpful and disturbing of all the words that could possibly be written on paper. Manhattan Times. I felt my gut clench. Manhattan. It was one of the cities that the other mind in limbo had shown me. They had even shown me signs on some of the buildings in the area that had shared the city's name. I had already figured that I wasn't anywhere near any area that I knew of, but this was a whole new area. Hearing a small growl from behind me, I glanced back towards the noise. The young man was standing there, growling as his face seemed to shimmer in and almost violently. Realizing that the alley was not a safe place to stay, I too ran towards the nearest crowd of people, and began to follow the crowd. Now, just in case anyone ever decided to follow my example, come out of limbo, and then take a walk in Manhattan, don't forget your shoes. I'm really not joking. Whether it was the explosion or just being stuck in limbo, I had somehow lost my jacket and my shoes before arriving in Manhattan. My white shirt wasn't too bad, my short time in the alley had soiled it a bit, while my pants were another matter altogether. Unlike my shirt, my pants were ripped in several parts near my knees and the bottom part was completely frayed and falling apart. To make matters worse, my pouch and kunai holster were missing as well. I groaned. This was definitely not the best I'd ever looked, and was far from the most comfortable way to travel. Not that I really had any choice in the matter. As I ran away from the young man in the alley and joined the crowd, I was immediately swept away by the crowd. It was hot, and I'm not saying it was fire country hot, but it was still hot nothing the less. And since I was barefoot, I had the lovely sensation of my feet being scalded as I walked down the road. And yet, there I was, casually strolling with the crowd in no direction in particular, ignoring the pain as much as I could. The only problem was that my feet didn't seem to share the same sentiment as the rest of my body. The hot, rock-like ground seemed to release the heat into my feet far too quickly for my liking. I was practically walking on hot coals, without any end in sight. Added to the fact that I was almost 100% sure that I was being followed, I was not a happy ninja. Growling in annoyance, I began to glance around. I don't really know what I was looking for, any place I could duck in. To give me some time to think up a plan. After a moment of just looking around, I saw a place that a big shoe on the front. Figuring that I could get some shoes while I was hiding, I quickly ducked inside. As I entered the store, I couldn't help but look around in amazement. The place had all sorts of things I had never seen, or even thought of before. The ground was covered in some kind of pelt flooring, rather than normal wooden floors. The entire store was filled with shoes, which I'm guessing was the only product that they sold. And then there was the lighting. No candles or anything like that, no. They had some kind of lightning jutsu above our heads, illuminating the entire store. I couldn't feel any chakra being used by anyone around me, which made me wonder where the chakra was coming from. There was a desk to my left as I walked in. The woman behind the desk seemed nice enough, if not confused by my lack of footwear. I just tried to grin as innocently as possible as I asked where the sandals were. She pointed me in the direction of the footwear I was looking for, though she advised me to try out some of the other footwear in the building. Since I didn't really have much else to do, I told her that I'd look at them. There was a lot of footwear in the store. And not all of it was ninja sandals either. There were all kinds of footwear, sandals with toe covers, sandals without straps over the upper part of the foot or heel, and even boots. Grinning like a fool, I walked over to some of the different displayed shoes. There were a lot of them that were made of a material that I had never felt before. Stuff that felt too soft to be useful in combat. I heard the young man from the alley enter before I saw him. He looked around the shop like he was looking for someone, probably me. I tried to pretend I was just a normal customer, looking for shoes like everyone else. There were a couple of other people who noticed the young man, but they seemed to ignore him, only looking at him for a moment. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eyes, noticing that as the shimmering faded out, only one eye remained. I blinked in confusion. Okay, I'll admit, I have seen some weird stuff as a ninja. There was man who had 6 arms and another who could manipulate his bones into weapons, being some of the stranger people that I've met. So I wasn't really worried about that. What I was confused about was that no one else seemed to pay any attention to it, when for everyone else, it was clearly something that was not normal. Then I remembered the illusion the guy had put over his face. And put two and two together. Damn, not good. I whispered to myself as I moved away towards the back door. If this guy could create illusions, he was going to be a real problem for me. Even with my knowledge of how to dispel illusions. I heard a low throaty growl, and made the mistake of looking up. Noticing the movement, the man shoved people out of his path as he forced his way towards me. Cursing under my breath, I ran through the back door. The back door, as it turned out, didn't lead back outside. Instead, it led to a larger room filled with lots of shelves, with even more boxes. Lots of boxes. I grimaced as one of the employees yelled that I wasn't supposed to be back there. I ignored him and moved swiftly through the aisles. I could hear him continue to yell at me. I heard the door I'd just entered slam violently against the wall. "What is wrong with you kids?" the employee yelled, turning his attention on the one-eyed man. "You are not supposed to come back." He didn't get a chance to finish what he was saying as One Eye shoved him into one of the metal shelves. I figured calling him One Eye would probably help me remember him better. "Halfling, why are you hiding? Halfling, is he talking to me?" I thought as I hid behind another one of the shelves. "Hero," One Eye yelled, his thunderous voice still pretty far from my own position. "Come out. I just want to speak with you." "Sure you do," I muttered, not really able to shut my stupid mouth. There was a slamming noise behind me. I looked over my shoulder, trying to see what was going on, when I realized what One Eye was doing. He was shoving over the shelves in an attempt to flush me out. And to my horrific luck, it was working. "Come out, hero. Your parent has abandoned you to my hands," he shouted, shoving over another couple of shelves. I ducked down. What did he think he knew about my parents? I'd seen them both in my memories, and I distinctly remember watching their deaths, repeatedly. So why was One Eye talking about them like at least one was alive? Kronos knows your anguish, he can help you survive the coming clash of powers. Come out, and let me take you to him. We can work together, and conquer your foolish parents, who abandoned you. That was the last straw for me. My parents may have been dead, and I may have already known that they both loved and cared about me. When anyone thinks they can just talk about my parents like they knew them, and like they had just abandoned me for no reason, I couldn't help myself. With a loud roar, I rushed out from behind the shelf. I could see One Eye's grin as he saw me come out change in less than a second as I rushed him. Now, One Eye was a big man, but I had lots strength training and surprise on my side. I slammed in, to him going as fast as I could considering the short distance, and knocked him over. Apparently he hadn't expected this, because he didn't fight back for a moment. Unfortunately for him, that gave me the opportune time to pull myself up and punch him across the face. I continued hitting him, muttering curses about him and insulting his intelligence. One Eye apparently didn't like that, as he swatted me off him, slamming me into a large pile of boxes. "Why do you fight me, hero? Do you not understand what Kronos is offering you? He offers you a chance to get back at your Olympian parent, and prove your worth." One Eye said as he picked himself up. I shook my head. What did One Eye just say? Olympian. I remember hearing that word from somewhere, but my head was ringing for me to think clearly. Growling, I pushed myself back up, feeling surprisingly stronger than when I had gotten knocked down. I suppose the blood pumping through my veins was finally getting the adrenaline to my brain. "Don't insult me, or my family," I yelled, rushing him yet again. This time though, he was ready. Instead of taking the hit, he took a swing with his left arm, grazing me and sending me into another set of shelves. I growled, picking myself up once again. "You're strong, halfling, I'll give you that." Okay, I was definitely certain I'd heard that word before. That's why we need you. That's why we need your strength, your skills, to help us win this war. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, spitting out a small amount of blood that had gathered in my mouth. One Eye gave me a surprised, but also slightly pleased look. "You mean you don't know? You don't know that there are others out there like you? That there are others with your gifts? Others out there, who are being plagued by monsters like me? None the wiser to the truth. And then there are the ones who are blinded by their foolish brethren who tell them that they will be safe at a despicable place such as Camp Half-Blood. I blinked. This guy was a monster. If he was a monster, I was very curious as to what other people were called, monsters. So you're a monster. One Eye grinned. Yeah, a cyclops, if you want to get into the names of things. I nodded. Okay, I get that. But I'm not going with you. One Eye growled. Why? Do you not understand what I'm telling you? No, I get it. You're telling people that their lives could be better. By telling them to join the people who hunted them down. I said as I felt my glare hardening as I stared him down. One Eye laughed. It was not a pleasant laugh. Then you will die. One Eye rushed forward. Scowling, I leapt over him, watching as he fell over the shelves that he had previously knocked me into. As I landed, I shoved myself back towards him, leaping with my elbow leading. As One Eye tried to push himself up, I slammed into him, knocking him back into the shelves. Moving as fast as I could, I wrapped my arm around his neck, squeezing for all I was worth. One Eye apparently realized what I was doing, because he tried to stand up. However, I just squeezed harder, stopping him from being able to move so freely. He tried to swat me off of his back, but I just pressed myself closer to his back. I even felt him try and roll over. I shoved my foot against the ground to stabilize myself and stop him from moving at the same time. Finally, after a couple more seconds, he was finally out. I stood up slowly, uncertain of whether or not he would stay down. I've had plenty of bad experience with people not staying down the first time me or anyone else knocked them out. I knew that if I didn't make sure he was down, he would get back up, stronger than before. Luckily, it didn't look like One Eye was getting up anytime soon. I looked down at One Eye, King over some of the things he had said. He definitely called me a halfling, said something about me having an Olympian parent, and talked about a place called Camp Half-Blood. All things that I had already heard of. From limbo. Growling in frustration, I took a deep breath. I scrunched up my face, trying to remember what I'd learned about Camp Half-Blood. After a couple of moments, a specific memory came to mind. One that gave me directions on where to find the camp. A grin crossed my face as I turned around. I almost lost it as I nearly tripped over a box that had slid right behind my feet. Glaring down, I just about kicked the box away when I noticed something. They were some kind of heavy-duty boots. Bending over, I pulled them out. Not bad, I thought. They looked like they could take some heavy use. And dish out some painful hits should I need them to. I pulled them on, my glare returning to a grin which widened as I wiggled my toes in the base of the shoe. Just my size. As I tied the string that was laced through, which helped tighten the boots on my feet, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, my luck was getting better. Maybe Cammy had decided to give me a break. As I walked out of the store and back into the rain, I swore I hear the faint sound of a girlish laughter. I soon found that following the directions I was given was far harder than I ever imagined. I had the directions, the landmarks, even the name of the area, Delphi Strawberry Service, that sold as a cover, you guessed it, strawberries. Unfortunately, that didn't give me any real clue as to where I was to go from Manhattan to get to the Camp Half-Blood. As I looked for any of the other landmarks I could possibly use, my stomach growled out in pain. Blushing despite myself, I realized that I had not had anything to eat since I'd gotten to Manhattan. Plus, since I'd fought One Eye, I was even more exhausted and hungry than I would usually be. Silently wishing for food, I looked around. Desperate for anywhere I could get food, and fast. Whining quietly, my eyes scanned the surrounding area. I knew that there was food somewhere, the main problem was that I didn't know what sold what. There was the possibility of just checking them all out, but that would be time-consuming, and with the metal beast still dominating the roads, I couldn't cross over to check out most of the shops on the other side. Then I noticed the line of people walking in front of the metal beasts. And the beasts were waiting for them to cross. Curious, I followed the way that the crowd moved towards the crossroad. There were different lights hanging over the crossroads, flashing different lights in some kind of pattern. I attempted to reach out with chakra to see who was controlling the lights. But, like the shoe store, I couldn't feel anyone controlling the lights. Impossible, and yet I was watching them work all the same. It's really amazing, traffic at this hour. I jumped as I whipped around to face the speaker. I was surrounded by so much noise that it was difficult to really know when one single person was attempting to follow you. This had been frustrating me for a bit before. But I had tried to ignore it because I was hungry, not the best thing to do. But can you really blame me? I was hungry. Facing the speaker, I gave him a quick once-over. He was a middle-aged man with an athletic figure, slim and fit with salt and pepper hair. He had black curly hair, with pointed sort of ears, and a sly grin. He was wearing a strange shirt with words on it that took a moment to sort themselves out. New York City Marathon, I asked, gently scratching my ear. The man grinned. Yep, I run at least one a year. Okay, I said, unsure of what to think of the man. He seemed nice enough. But then again, I've known people as nice as him who turned out worse than they had seemed. You headed anywhere in particular? He asked. I opened my mouth to speak, when I was interrupted by my stomach deciding to speak for me with a loud growl. I looked away slightly while the man just gave me a curious raised eyebrow. I'm going to go with a wild guess that you're looking for somewhere to eat, no? I nodded, silently cursing my stomach. For a seasoned warrior, the sound of a growling stomach was the equivalent of telling everyone you weren't at your strongest. And in a strange and unfamiliar town like this, I was in need of keeping my guard and energy up. The man chuckled, reminding me that he was still there. Well, I do happen to know that there is a couple of fast food places right across the street. If you want, I can take you there. I almost refused, not really liking the fact that some random person was helping me, probably with some ulterior motive. However, as I opened my mouth to speak, a horrifying thought came to me. Gamma-chan, my frog-shaped wallet, was still lying in the hotel with Pervy Sage. Which meant that even if I could get to it right now, I was more than likely broke, without really spending anything either. Just my luck. Thanks, I said, glancing at the man again. He has a kind smile, that helped relax me a little, if only a little. Great. Follow me. It's really not that far. He walked out into the middle of the road, me following on his heels. As we crossed the road, I was surprised as I noticed that as we had been talking, the beasts had come to a standstill, making it possible for us to cross. Halfway across, I couldn't help but take a closer look at them. Glancing at the nearest beast, I blinked in confusion. There were people sitting inside of the beasts. Shaking my head in confusion, I hurried after the man who'd already made it across the street. Falling into step with the man, I took another look around. There wasn't much difference in what was around us, although now this might have just been my imagination. The crowd seemed smaller, and easier to move through. So, where are you from? The man asked. My mind shut down for a moment, unsure of what I was supposed to say without saying too much. Suddenly, words from Pervy Sage's training came to mind, perfect for this situation. When lying on the run, it's sometimes best to tell a partial truth as you already have half of the information you need, and the other person is probably looking for. I'm looking for a friend. I lost him a while ago, and since we were headed in the same direction, I figured I'd meet with them there. I said, silently congratulating myself on my quick thinking. I scratched the back of my head nervously, wondering if he'd buy it. So you're a traveler. That's cool, we get a lot of people like that here, the man said, nodding as though he'd just understood something. He was about to say something else when his pocket suddenly began to shake. He gave me a sheepish look as he pulled out a small box. Will you excuse me a moment? I have to take this. I nodded. What the heck is that? I thought as I watched him fiddle with the box for a moment. He muttered something into the box, acting like he was actually having a conversation with it. After a moment, he sighed and put the box back into his pocket. I'm sorry, but I must go now. No, that's fine. Go right ahead, I said, relieved to hear that he was leaving. He was just a little strange for my tastes. Well, before I go, I should probably give you this. As he spoke, he pulled out a backpack from behind himself. Funny, I don't remember him having that before. I thought as I hesitantly took the bag from him. It looked normal, I suppose, a single strap that went over my left shoulder. A single pouch full of some stuff, pretty basic. But the thing that made all my suspicions leave in seconds was when I noticed the bag's color. It was a nice bright orange. I decided to reassess my opinion of him. This guy was awesome. Grinning like a fool at the surprising gift, my training decided to remind me of reality. There are very few people who will offer you gifts for free. Why? The man shrugged. I don't need something like that, got enough to carry as it is. Besides, I'm certain you'll have more need of it than I will. I looked over his face, trying to look for something. Anything out of place with his words. He had a kind, yet knowing smile. I've only seen smiles like that from the old man before he died. Unable to sense anything out of place, and figuring I would need the bag. I shouldered the pack, I adjusted it to get it to feel right before speaking again. Thanks. No problem. There's some useful stuff in there, but if you ever run into a situation where you need to get out of trouble, just tell the bag to open in your language. And just to be safe, do be sure to tell it to close when you're done. Everything should stay with you that way. I blinked. What? Oh, and I almost forgot. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that reminded me a little of Gama-chan, only in folded leather. Bad habits are hard to break. Sorry for taking this. I'll see you later, Naruto. I took the object from him, peeking inside. In the folded leather was a bunch of green paper, a piece of paper with the words, "Bus Pass," on it, and a piece of plastic. Curious. I took out the piece of plastic, turning it over in my hands. After turning it for a bit, I noticed the difference in the two sides, one was blank while the other had some writing in it. Looking over the writing side, I felt my blood freeze over. It had a picture of myself with some words saying I was from Leaf Academy. I looked up, wanting to question the man. However, he was gone. Probably melded into the crowd. I looked at the spot where he'd just stood, a shiver running up my spine. He'd called me Naruto, even though I hadn't told him my name. Ying. To shake off the uneasy feeling the man had left with me, I walked into the nearest restaurant, a place called Burger King. Glancing around, I began counting. Despite no longer being with pervy Sage, I figured that I would need to keep practicing what he'd taught me. It had definitely was a simple enough thing to practice, no chakra necessary. There were at least 5 employees that I could see. Info I didn't see the point in knowing. There were 6 men, 2 with families, a young teen sitting in a corner with a pair of strange-looking crutches nearby wearing a weird hat, and 3 others in similar brown jackets standing around somewhat suspiciously. 3 kids, 2 different aged girls and 1 boy, were trying to run from their parents' grasp. From what I could tell, both girls were with one couple while the boy was with the other. There was one single woman, a young woman who was talking to one of the employees, probably placing an order. It seemed safe enough, I suppose. However, I felt something in my gut telling me to stay on guard. Something wasn't right here. I walked forward nervously, noticing a board behind one of the employees' head, the menu I suppose. I looked at what they had, feeling frustrated by the selection. I've never heard of a cheeseburger before, but it didn't sound like the best thing to eat right now. And besides that, I was on a mission to find my glorious ramen. The one thing they didn't have on the menu. I just about cried. How could any food place not have ramen? It was the greatest food ever created. To not have it was blasphemy in my opinion. I almost walked out then and there, certain that there was ramen out there. However, both my stomach and a new foe fought me. I glanced at one of the jacketed men. "Excuse me, but where's the bathroom?" The man gave me a dirty look, pointing down the side next to where the employees were still taking the woman's order. I nodded, quickly thanking him as I rushed towards the bathroom. There was no way I was this unlucky to be hurting this much. Sighing in relief, I walked towards the sink to wash my hands. As I dipped my hands into the water, I noticed my reflection in the mirror and paused. I still looked like my normal self, I suppose, naturally spiky blonde hair, 3 whisker marks on either cheeks, and a lean build. However, as I looked myself over, I couldn't help but think I looked different. My hair was a little longer, less spiky I suppose, but it was also more affected by gravity. Several strands hung in front of my face, no headband to keep it out of my eyes. I sighed, feeling a sudden weight on my shoulders. I looked older. Drying off my hands, I adjusted my bag as I grabbed the handle of the door. Looking at the bag, a curious thought occurred to me. What's in the bag? Walking back over to the mirror, I swung the bag off my shoulder and onto the counter. With a few deft movements, I zipped the pack open. Looking inside, I couldn't help the small chuckle that escaped me. Inside the bag were several sets of clothes. Nothing fancy I suppose, but definitely better than what I was wearing. And as I looked through the different shirts, I just about cried. There were so many orange shirts. I love cami right now. Sifting through the clothes, I pulled out an orange button-down shirt and a pair of dark brown khakis. Grinning from ear to ear, I walked into the nearest stall. After a few moments, I stepped out in my new clothes, feeling better than ever. Putting the folded leather into my pocket, I put my old shirt and pants into the bag. In doing so, my hand brushed up against something else in the bag. Somewhat frustrated by how confused all of this was making me, I pulled out the offending object. It was a jar, similar to the jar of healing ointment that Hinata had given me during the Chunin exams. Looking it over, I noticed a label. Squinting my eyes to try and better see the words, I slowly read, H. Hermes Athletic Muscle Relief. What the heck? Opening the jar, I scooped a small amount of the ointment out. Giving it a small sniff, I smiled as the foreign aroma hit my nose. It actually smelt pretty good. Touching it to my forearm, I immediately felt the relief. I'd been trying so hard to ignore the pain, the relief soothed and relaxed me. Whoever this Hermes guy was, he sure knew his stuff. I rubbed as much as I could on everywhere that hurt, almost all of it all over my body. There was a small spray-on bottle with it that read, apply to clothing for all-day relief. With a shrug I sprayed a layer of it onto my clothes. Smiling at the relief, I shouldered the bag. My stomach growled, reminding me what I'd come here to get. Chuckling to myself I headed out the door. Today was looking good. I'd spoke too soon. As I walked out of the restroom, I could see that the atmosphere had changed. Most of the people I could see were huddled into a corner, a frightened look on their faces. The employees were more than likely hiding under the counter. The three men in the leather jackets were standing around, strange objects in their hands. By the way the people were staring at them in fear made me a bit curious. But I had bigger issues. My life has been to protect people. And I wasn't just going to stand around and let these men terrify these innocent people. Of course, with my awesome ninja training, I would be able to take them out without them ever noticing. Plus, I had the element of, "Oi, where'd you come from?" Surprise. That's the guy who went to the bathroom. He's not wearing his same clothes, but it's definitely him. He's got those weird marks on his face like I told ya. The man who directed me to the bathroom said as he turned his weapon on me. Weird. My birthmarks are completely normal. I thought, feeling why sure that if I voiced the thought it wouldn't go over well. Instead, I said, what's going on? The first guy, the one who first noticed me, growled. Just shut up and go sit with the others. I almost laughed. If this guy was trying to intimidate me, he wasn't doing a very good job. The weapons in their right hands was the only thing that was truly intimidating about them. There was plenty of killing intent. But it was so wildly unfocused that I wasn't fazed. If I hadn't faced people like Zabuza and Gaara, I might have been slightly intimidated. But since I had, it felt pathetic. I walked forward, putting myself in the middle of the three men. I still hadn't figured out what my plan was, especially since I didn't have a weapon, and was outnumbered. That is to say, I was trying to think of a plan that didn't involve me revealing my abilities. With my shadow clone jutsu, I could match their numbers and even exceed them. But since I still didn't know enough about how things worked here, I wasn't willing to reveal myself as a ninja. Did you not hear me? I said get in the corner. The man yelled again, putting the barrel against the back of my head. I let my eyes move to the other two thugs. There was one on my left and one on my right, just spaced enough to notice that one was covering the entrance while the other was guarding the hostages. Both of them had their attention on me. Their weapons pointed down and away from me. I frowned. They must have had a lot of skill if they were willing to point their weapons away from me. Or they had no idea what they were dealing with. Get in the corner. As I felt him push the weapon more against my head, I decided to change the situation. Spinning around, I used the outside of my left arm to knock the man's arm away and upward, effectively disarming him. Not waiting a second, my right arm followed my left, the outside of my palm making contact with the man's throat. He went down coughing and sputtering. The second man, the one covering the entrance, was next. He tried to bring his weapon level with me, but only got halfway as my foot connected with his face, knocking him onto his back in a way that looked rather painful. His weapon flew out of his hand, the longer barrel portion sliding into my hand. Continuing my turn, I brought the handle of the second man's weapon down between the third man's eyes. He apparently wasn't keeping up with everyone else, because he had a second to look at the weapon cross-eyed before it collided with his skull. With that, all three men were incapacitated. All this happened in 5 seconds. Dropping their weapon, I looked at their crumpled forms. I'd hit pretty much all of them in the face, and had knocked 2 of them out. The first man that I'd hit was no threat yet, as he was still trying to catch his breath. He seemed to be looking for something, his weapon I guess. I didn't see it either, and glanced around for it. "Don't move," a voice yelled. I glanced towards the voice, wondering if I'd missed on of the assailants. However, it turned out to be alright, as it was the other teen who had picked up the first man's weapon and was pointing it at the man. I noticed his hawking hands and realized that he wasn't a warrior. But he was still acting to protect everyone. I could definitely respect that. My stomach let out another rumble, turning a few heads. I scratched the back of my head nervously. I know this is a bad time, but could I possibly have some food? As it turns out, beating up people does in fact has a few rewards. I ordered a dozen of those, cheese-burgers since it would be the best I could get under the circumstances. As I realizing that the green paper in the folded leather was money, I began to rummage through my pockets to heave my money out to pay. Before I could get it out though, the boy's father stepped forward and paid for it. When I asked why, they told me that I helped to keep their family safe. I sat down at one of the closest tables and took out one of the cheeseburgers. I quickly unwrapped and shoved the thing into my mouth. I'm not sure if it was from hunger, or just trying to get the first bit over with. I was immediately grateful though, as the taste hit my tongue. It wasn't ramen, but it wasn't half bad either. Within a moment I had gone through close to half the burgers. As I was about to dig into my 6th, I felt a small tug on my shirt. I glanced down, seeing the little girls looking up at me with big smiles on their faces. "Thank you, Mr. Hero," they said as they handed me a piece of paper. Confused, but happy to see that they were happy, I smiled. Opening the paper, I saw their attempt at drawing me standing on the 3 bad guys with an arrow explaining who was who. At the top were a few words that were obviously thanks. I couldn't tell because the words stayed as they were. "Is that me?" I asked, acting confused. "Nah, can't be. I don't look that cool." "No way, you were even cooler," the young boy suddenly popped up and said. He had a grin from ear to ear, and eyes as wide as, well, the cheeseburgers. I scratched the back of my head nervously. "Thanks. I was just doing what anyone else would though." "Yeah, but you were all, pow, bang, slam," the boy said, trying to mimic what I'd done. The girls giggled, the younger of them trying to follow along. The boy looked back at me. "I mean, they were going to shoot you. Weren't you scared?" "Shoot me? Is that what those weapons do?" I thought, shaking my head. I didn't have time to be scared. People could have been hurt if I didn't do something. The boy's eyes widened, and his mouth dropped. I thought I might have said something wrong. So cool. Or made myself into a role model all over again. "John, come on, we've got to go." He boy's mother called as she and his father got their stuff together. But mom." "No buts, now let's go." The boy turned to me. "Bye, Mr. Hero." Bye, John," I said, watching the boy run off. I felt a small pain in my heart as I watched them. Living in my memories gave me enough images to picture what I would have looked like if it were me running to my parents. It hurt, even though I was glad to see them. A shadow suddenly loomed over me. I glanced up to see the teen standing over me. He looked a bit uneasy as he spoke. "Hi." Hi." He motioned towards the seat across from me. "Do you mind if I sit here?" "Sure." He sat down, fiddling with his fingers nervously. Hi. You already said that." I chuckled. "Oh, right," the teen said. He scratched his cheek, nervousness practically oozing off of him. "So where are you headed?" "Maybe I don't know much on being socially acceptable, but I'm pretty sure people start with introductions." Shrugging, I just decided to answer his question. "I'm headed to Delphi's strawberry service. Heard there were good strawberries there. By the way, the name's Naruto." "Billy." he said, looking a bit better. Then, he suddenly stiffened, looking excited. Did you say Delphi's strawberry service? Okay, weird reaction, I thought. Yeah, why? And no reason, he said, almost falling off his seat. I just so happened to have gotten some work there this summer. Cool. You wouldn't happen to know how to get there from here, would you? I asked, feeling excited myself. His energy was surprisingly infectious as I found myself grabbing the rest of my burgers and heading towards the entrance, Billy right besides me. It's pretty easy. In fact, if you have some money, we can be there in a half hour. Billy said, using his crutches to propel him forward in a strange way. I had thought one or both of his legs were broken, but he seemed fine to me. Okay. I stopped at the edge of the side road, watching Billy wave down a yellow metal beast. There was no way all this was happening. I need shoes, monster shows up and I get shoes. My clothes need replacement, a guy gives me a bag with clothes. I need food, I get treated to lunch after beating up some thugs. And now I was getting a ride to the place I was trying to go to, and had a guide to show me where to go. I heard a small, girlish laugh behind me. I glanced behind myself, seeing nothing there. And yet, I knew someone was watching me. There was laughter again, as Billy waved me over to begin our trek to Camp Half-Blood. The ride was rather uneventful. When the man in front asked where we wanted to go, Billy just told him. The man tried to refuse, but when I handed him some of the bills from my pouch, ones with a balding man pictured on them, he stopped talking and drove. I didn't enjoy the ride. We were moving fast enough for sure, but we had so many near run-ins with other beasts that I was certain we'd crash. But somehow, he wove through them without too much trouble. As we got out of the city I realized that it would have been easy to get there. In fact, I probably could have made it without Billy's help if I'd figured out I could hitch a ride. No, that I didn't want to travel with Billy, he was definitely a nice enough to be around. He just seemed to be too excited for going to work, kind of like how Lee might react to training. I munched on my last burger as we rolled to a stop. And I was surprised I could still eat anything considering how nauseous I felt. Alright boys, this is as far as I can take you. Any further is private property. The driver said as he stuck his head a little ways out of the window. You sure your friend was coming here? I nodded. There was no doubt in my mind that this was where I needed to be to get some answers. Smiling to the man, I gave him a little wave. Yep, this is it. Thanks for the ride. Alright, I'll see you then. Glancing towards the camp, I noticed that Billy suddenly seemed far more nervous than he had a moment before. He was muttering something under his breath in a language that I didn't understand. I only caught a part of it that I could understand. Grover's luck. What's that? Billy seemed to tense up at that. Glancing up he tried to chuckle lightheartedly, though it sounded more like he was trying not to choke. Oh nothing, just a joke me and a couple of friends share. AF. Friend of ours made a funny mistake when he tried to apply here. I shrugged, and began walking towards the hill. Billy walked up next to me, making a claw-like gesture over his heart with his hand and thrust outwards. For some reason, this did not help to comfort me. If anything, it made me think that something bad was definitely going to happen if he felt the need to make a warning gesture like that. Speeding up a little more, I tried to ease both of our worries. So, what do you think you'll be working on here? Billy glanced up, a look of confusion on his face. What do you think you're going to be working on up here? I repeated, noticing the look on his face. His eyes were pointed towards the ground going back and forth, like he was looking for the answers in the grass. I knew that look. It was the look of someone about to lie. I'd seen it so many times I could practically feel his nervousness. Well, I suppose I'll be helping with deliveries for the most part, he replied, trying to use his crutches to propel himself a little faster. I kept up with him easily, though I felt slightly winded. I see. And what sort of stuff are you going to deliver? Billy looked around, trying to think of something to say. In my head, I applauded myself. I'd effectively broken down his lie, even when he had an obvious answer he could go with. Something so obvious, I picked up on it. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do there. I grinned. So you won't be one of the people who will be delivering strawberries. That's too bad. Realizing his mistake, he sputtered a little as he tried to fix his mistake. Well, I just got work there, so I wasn't aware. Funny name this place has, don't you think? Billy blinked as he turned to me. What? I shrugged. I just don't get why they named it Delphi's Strawberry Service. Oh well, you see, Delphi is referring to the oracle, like the Oracle of Delphi from Greek mythology. The strawberry part is, Billy said, slowing down as his mind caught up with his mouth. He then began to do a rather impressive imitation of a fish. A grin crossed my face. I had never realized that teasing people was so much fun. I kind of understood why Kakashi joked about why he was late. We had a funny reaction every time. I suddenly found my missing my tardy teacher. Scratching my cheek, a thought crossed my mind. What the heck was an oracle? And where was Delphi? I also felt a little uneasy as I saw his expression. As I watched him recover, I realized that my face was generally made into a similar face, usually after I'd said something stupid. And was getting hit by Sakura. I grimaced at the thought of her. There are a few redeeming qualities about her, but man does she have a temper. I've been on the receiving end of her fist on more than one occasion to be able to verify that. Turning towards Billy, I was about to tell him it was all right, and that I forgot important stuff all the time when I smelled it. The smell of smoke. Apparently Billy smelled it too, because his head whipped around. Oh no, he cried out as he looked upon the scene. My eyes took in the burning hillside, with what appeared to be a large battle consuming it. As I watched, I saw the two bulls running across the hill. I bumped Billy's shoulder. What are those things? Colchis bulls. Creations of Hephaestus. But, this shouldn't be possible. They aren't supposed to be able to get past the tree. I growled at the lack of information that really gave me. Seriously, who the heck was Hephaestus, and why would he be attacking the camp? Another good question would be how in the world Billy knew this. I didn't have time to ask those questions as I noticed the armored warriors attempting to set up a defense. Hold this, I yelled, as I swung my backpack over my shoulder and into Billy's chest. He sputtered indignantly that he wasn't some baggage boy, but I barely heard him. I was already on the move, covering the distance between where I'd been standing and the tree line. As I ran, I couldn't help but notice how slow I was moving. Normally a distance like this would have been covered in such a short time that I could blindside my opponent without them realizing I was coming. As it was, I was going at maybe 2/3 of my normal speed, fast enough to get there in time, but also slow enough to throw off my timing just a bit. The warriors were running about, attempting to keep the bulls at bay. Unlike myself, they were armed with spears, a good weapon for keeping distance from the bulls. I realized why this was probably a smart idea when the first bull's mouth opened with a creak and a jet of flame shot forth. Two of the warriors were unable to completely get out of the way, the hair on their funny headpieces catching fire. Growling, I leapt upon the nearest bull. While I was actually aiming to jump more over it, I slammed into it, hanging onto its back for dear life. I could feel the heat of the bull beneath me, but was easily able to ignore it. Holding on the other hand, was not as easy. The bull's red eyes glanced at me momentarily, the only indication of what it was about to do. A second later, it threw itself about, bucking and running in circles as it attempted to dislodge me. I slammed my hand into its back, denting it slightly as well as giving myself a handhold to use to hold on. Then again, it didn't really help me as I was thrown from the bull's back. Rolling to my feet, I growled at the bull. The bull turned to me, giving me what I supposed was a glare. I couldn't really tell its red eyes seemed to be glaring non-stop. It bellowed, a jet of flame shooting out and enveloping me. I closed my eyes, feeling the flames wrap around me. Gritting my teeth, I led upwards. Once again, I overestimated my strength and wound up plowing through the flames and rolling next to the bull. Not one to complain during an intense battle, I interlocked my fingers and swung at the bull's face. Look out! Behind you! I hesitated, my swing going wide as I turned to look behind myself. Bearing down on me was the second bull, silver horns shimmering in the light. Cursing softly, I spread my feet a bit, preparing for impact. I quickly realized this was a stupid idea, but was unable to do much else as the bull was mere feet away, the other bull having run a short ways away to position itself better. Taking a deep breath, I slammed my hand into the top of the bull's horns. This forced the bull face first into the ground, and unfortunately, its body decided to follow. I winced as the bull slammed into me, nearly breaking a few bones as it rolled over me. The wind knocked out of me, I struggled for breath. My silent victory of being alive was short-lived as the pounding hooves of the other bull quickly approached. Well, I suppose this is it. Damn it, I can't believe that I lost to a freaking bull. However, these thoughts were forced from my mind as something grabbed my legs and gave a sharp pull. I looked upwards, seeing the bull's hooves just barely missing my face as it plowed on by. That was too close for comfort. I sat up, looking at my savior. He was younger than I was, maybe 13 or 14 at the most. In one hand was a strangely crafted sword, the likes of which I'd never imagined. Unlike the other warriors, he wasn't wearing any armor, just some funny-looking clothes that were obviously not all that useful considering his situation. I gave him one of my patented fox-like grins. "What took you so long?" Apparently, that was a strange thing to say because he just gave me a confused look. I almost laughed at his expression, but seeing the first bull that I'd nearly hit completing its wide arc to charge at us again killed the humor of our situation. I grabbed the front of his shirt, digging my feet into his stomach as I rolled backwards. Pushing upwards with my legs, I launched him a ways away while also rolling to my feet. Glaring down the bull, I felt a sense of apprehension. There was no way I'd get out of this one without a scratch. "Tyson, help them," a girl suddenly yelled from behind me. "Can't get through." A boy's voice, sounding as though they were struggling with something. "Huh," I thought, unable to glance away as the bull was closing in on me. What was holding the warriors back? They had more than enough strength to help last I'd seen of them. The girl said something I didn't quite catch as there was a thundering noise around me. I had to catch myself before falling over, caught off guard by the suddenness of the noise. Then, I did fall on my butt as a large form suddenly barreled in front of me, standing between me and the bull. "Percy needs help." I scrambled to my feet, ready to assist this new ally. As I stood, however, I was nearly knocked back down as another jet of flame enveloped the both of us. Closing my eyes and gritting my teeth, I rolled out of the flames to get a better look. Luckily, the warriors were reassembling their defenses. There was an unarmored girl going through the ranks, giving direction. I'm not sure why, but there was something familiar about her. Glancing back at Tyson, I blinked as he emerged unscathed by the fire. Balling his hands into fists, he smashed them into the bull's face. "Bad cow." I grinned as I saw the bull's face crumple under the blows. Looking up to get a better look at my savior, I felt my gut clench. This guy, he only had one eye. What did One Eye call himself again? A cyclops. Yeah, that sounded right. And now here was the second one I'd seen today standing over me. And yet, I didn't feel the same urge to run from him as I had from One Eye. He had saved me, and for me that was good enough. I chuckled as the bull attempted to rise again, twin jets of flame shooting from its ears. Tyson just slammed his fist into the bull's head again. "Down," he shouted, forcing the bull onto its back in what had to be one of the most amazing displays of brute-like strength I'd ever seen. Sure, I'd put a dent into one of them, but Tyson destroyed them. I checked for the first bull, sure that it would come around again to finish the job. However, I soon realized it had been incapacitated by one of the warriors, a brutish-looking girl that despite her stringy brown hair reminded me of Sakura. A very strong and skilled Sakura. I shuddered at the thought, wondering just how much hurt I was going to be in if pissed her off. I was pretty sure I'd find out soon enough, seeing as she was storming towards us. She took off her helmet as she glared in my direction. "I see. Old almost feel the anger radiating off her. You ruined everything." "Sorry," I said, wincing slightly as I anticipated getting hit. She gave me a curious glance before pointing towards the first boy that had saved me. "Not you, him." "Oh," I muttered. I'm not really used to not being on the receiving end of an angry woman's wrath. I decided it was much safer than I'd thought. "Nice to see you too, Clarice," the girl next to the boy muttered. I hadn't realized she was there. Then that feeling of confusion returned. Where have I seen her before? "Don't ever try and save me again, Percy," Clarice yelled at the boy. Percy. Air quoting save for some reason. What kind of names were these? Seriously, Hermes, Billy, Clarice, Tyson, Percy, it's like listening to a foreign language. "Clarice, you have wounded campers." the girl said. I rubbed my head, feeling a pain rising in my head. I know my memory's bad, but this is ridiculous. I haven't even met her before. Clarice looked like that made her lose steam. Still giving him a glare as she stormed off. I watched her leave, raising an eyebrow at her actions. She was definitely a leader of some sort, but her anger at Percy's interference seemed a bit misplaced. Wouldn't another set of people be helpful? Especially against fire-breathing bulls. You're alive. Both of you. I'm sorry. Came to help. Disobeyed you. Tyson muttered. I turned back towards Percy. Noticing his surprised expression, I shrugged. It was just a little fire. The girl glanced towards me, shaking her head. That wasn't normal fire. Any normal person would Avenue been incinerated by the flames the moment they came into contact with them. I shrugged again. I'm not really normal. She kept shaking her head. No, not even children of Hephaestus are that fire resistant. You have to wear Medea's sunscreen SPF 50,000 if you don't want to get burned to a crisp. Huh, the only stuff I've put on was some muscle stuff made by someone named Hermes. I said, scratching my head as Percy and the girl shared a look. Is it really that surprising that I came out of that unscathed? Muscle stuff? The girl asked, suddenly looking thoughtful. Do you still have it? Yeah, let me just get it out of my... I reached for my shoulder, suddenly missing the familiar weight of my backpack. Glancing around, I noticed Billy running over to us, my backpack strapped to his shoulder. I waved him down. Billy, I need to see my backpack. Billy grinned as he approached us. Aw, man, that was amazing. You just rushed down here with no thought, no plan, and you came out completely fine. I should have known that I was right to bring you here. You're so strong you. Billy, bag, I said, trying not to soak in all the praise he was giving me. What? Oh right. Billy took my bag from his shoulder. His grin never leaving his face. I took the bag and handed it to the girl. She unzipped it and began rummaging through my stuff. I suddenly felt a bit uncomfortable about her looking through my stuff. And made to take the bag from her, however as I did so, she pulled out the ointment jar. Turning it over, her eyes darted about it. After a moment, she let out a frustrated sigh. Curse my dyslexia. I can't tell what the ingredients are. Billy took it from her, looking over the side that the girl had been attempting to read a moment before. That can't be right, he muttered. Looking at the front side again before turning it over again. Half of the ingredients in this are in Medea's sunscreen 50,000. The girl nodded, a look of relief on her face. Okay, that makes sense. But what about Tyson? There's no way he was able to put any of that on before the fight. How did he survive the flames? Percy asked, glancing towards the larger boy. As he stared at his face. A look of realization crossing his face. Tyson, you're a cyclops, the girl said. And a baby by the looks of him. That's why he had a hard time getting past the boundary, unlike the bulls. Time out, I said, getting everyone's attention. What boundary? The boundary that was established by Talia's tree, the girl said, shaking her head. I can't really explain it to you right now, but... I wasn't really listening to her anymore. My eyes had immediately become drawn to the particular tree that she was talking about after she'd said that name. Talia, rubbing my forehead to alleviate some of the pain in my head. I found my eyes following along the imaginary boundary line. I remembered the outside portion of Camp Half-Blood, but nothing about the inside. Gazing at the pine tree, I noticed that the needles on the tree were a yellow, sickly color. Around the base of the tree were small piles of dead and fallen needles. A short way up the tree, I noticed that there was green ooze coming from the tree. Why is the tree so important? I asked, glancing back towards the girl. She bit her lip, like some bad memory had surfaced that she didn't want to talk about. Talia was a daughter of Zeus who was turned into a tree by her father to keep her from dying. Her spirit has kept monsters from invading the camp since then. I was there when it happened. Who's Zeus? I asked. All of them gave me a shocked look. Overhead, I swore I heard the crack of thunder. But that wasn't possible, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Who's Zeus? Don't you know anything about the Greek gods? Billy asked, his jaw practically on the ground. No, I said, glancing between them. Why? The girl glanced away. Because the only way you could have found this place and entered, weakened boundary or not. Would be that you're a half-blood like us. Huh? I asked, giving her a confused glance. Percy seemed to be exasperated by my responses. It means you had one human parent, and one god parent. I thought it over for a second, before coming up with an appropriate response. Bullshit. Percy looked a bit surprised. I'm being serious. That's not a reason to believe you, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. Billy spoke up. Would you believe us if you had proof that there were more, unexplainable things for you to see? I shrugged. I don't really see how anything else would help. Billy then dropped his pants, revealing a pair of hairy hindquarters. I'm not sure which surprised me more, the fact that he was half animal, or the fact that he'd actually just dropped his pants. I'm a satyr. Half man, half goat. Were found in some of the stories about the gods. He glanced up at me. Believe us now. Not having anything to really say to that, I just nodded my head. I looked back at Percy. He just shrugged. It was a bit of a shock to me too, but you'll get it once we explain it to you. I nodded, extending my hand to him. You saved my life, and I don't really know who you are. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I'm Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon, and I'm Annabeth Chase, daughter of Athena. I sighed, the pain in my head suddenly alleviating itself. Looking at Annabeth, memories rose, overshadowing her current look with a younger, more innocent-looking girl. I'm not sure why, but it felt strange seeing Annabeth as her older self as the shadow faded away. You're older than I remember, I muttered, palming my face as I let this information sink in. She gave me a curious look. What? I shook my head. Nothing. It's nothing. I looked at the tree again, remembering how Annabeth had said she had been there when Talia had been turned into a tree. With the memories I'd gotten from Limbo, I realized that things had changed from whenever the other person had been here. And if I was right, then I'd gotten knowledge of Camp Half-Blood from Talia. I turned to Annabeth again. All right, I think I believe you guys now. Why don't you explain all of this, Greek god, stuff to me? I'm sure we've got plenty of time. As we walked through the camp, I couldn't help but be in awe of everything around us. There was just so much to take in. My eyes darted about, trying to see everything. I had so many questions I wanted to ask, like what everything was, and why certain things were happening in certain areas. Luckily for me, I wasn't the only one who wanted answers. Wastat? Tyson asked with a surprised voice, looking as fascinated as I felt. The stables for the Pegasi. Percy answered, looking rather depressed for some reason. The winged horses. Winged horses, I thought, not sure if he was going crazy or not. Sure enough though, one of the other campers walked out of the stables not a moment later leading a winged horse out. I just blinked in surprise. Well, that's new. Wastat? Tyson asked, pointing to the next area of interest. Those are the toilets. Good information to know, I thought as I thought of the horrible time I had once had with the bathroom. And spoiled milk. That had not been a fun time to relive. Wastat? The cabins for the campers. If they don't know who your Olympian parent is, they poo you in the Hermes cabin, that brown one over there, until you're determined. Then, once they know, they put you in your dad or mom's group. I nodded absent-mindedly for a second, before my eyes widened. Hermes? You mean the guy who made that muscle stuff? Percy raised an eyebrow. I don't know about that. Hermes is the god of travelers, which is why undetermined kids get put there. But, why is his name? Sometimes, mortals use the names of the Olympians for their product. Annabeth said, a small smile crossing her face. It's a name that they're familiar with, and it sometimes helps the product. But really, the gods need mortals to remember them. It helps keep them alive. I scratched my head in confusion. I'm not sure I get it. Annabeth shook her head in an exasperated manner. We'll explain later. Tyson poked me on the shoulder. You have a cabin. I chuckled. We'd only known each other for maybe a few moments, and I already knew that me and Tyson were going to get along just fine. He reminded me of myself and Konohamaru, innocent but with a lot more strength than people expected. No, Tyson, I just got here. Today is my first day, just like you. Tyson smiled a very toothy grin. Oh, I get it. He looked at Percy. You have a cabin. Number 3, he said, pointing towards one of the buildings. I looked towards the cabins, really noticing them for the first time. They were lined up in a U formation, one large one was in the center with 12 others on either side. The one that Percy was pointing to was a gray building that was made of some kind of stone that felt nostalgic. If I remembered right, I'd seen similar stone for the bridge that Tazuna had been building when me and my team had gone to help protect him. You live with friends in the cabin? Tyson asked, an innocent look in his eyes. No, it's just me, Percy said, a sad look in his eyes as he looked down. He looked depressed about something, but I wasn't sure what it was. I glanced at Annabeth, hoping to get some answers. But she just shook his head. I guess it was a sore subject for him. We walked towards the largest house in the center of the ring of cabins. I noticed that there was something different about this cabin. There was a feeling of power that came from the cabin, like there was something powerful about it. As we walked towards it, I looked around the campgrounds, noticing a strange feeling in the air. I could tell that they were anxious, but there was something else. Resentment, anger, even a bit of frustration. While the anxiousness was to be expected, I was mildly curious about the other emotions. Or better yet, how I could feel all the emotions. I mean, this was not something that I should have been able to notice in normal situations. And yet here I was, noticing how one pair of kids were about at each other's throats, anger rolling off of them, while others whispered quietly with anxiety rolling off of them. The whole camp was in a state of preparation. I watched some of the kids from one of the cabins walking out with swords like the kind that Percy had used on the hill. There were strange-looking people walking around with bows in their hands, whispering nervously to one another. After a short while of walking, we walked into the house. Now I will say, that my initial reaction to the whole camp was that things seemed strange. I mean, Billy was a half-man, half-goat thing. Percy and Annabeth, and according to them, meat were the children of gods, and they were preparing for war. However, the man in the room took the cake. Well, the half-man, half-horse dude took the cake. He was listening to some kind of music that I found to be a bit annoying. I've never heard music like that, and was hoping that I couldn't have to for a long, long time. Tyson's eye widened as he took in the man-horse. Pony. I beg your pardon, the man-horse said, looking highly offended. Annabeth stepped forward. Hello, Chiron. The man-horse, Chiron, smiled sadly. Hello, Annabeth. It's good to see you again. And you, Percy, you have certainly grown over the year. Percy looked quite a bit brighter upon seeing Chiron. Hey Chiron, how are you? Fine, just fine, Chiron said, a look in his eyes that told me he was anything but fine. Chiron, what's going on? Isn't there anyone who can help the tree? Annabeth asked, a pleading look in her eyes. Chiron sighed. No, I'm afraid not. I've tried everything I possibly know how to do. However, this type of poison is one that came from the underworld, and that I have never seen. It is possible that it is a type of poison from a monster from the pits of Tartarus. Then we know who's responsible, Crow. Do not invoke the Titan Lord's name, Percy. Especially not here, not now. But last summer he tried to cause a civil war in Olympus. This has to be his idea. He'd get Luke to do it, that traitor. Feeling way out of the loop, I raised my hand. Question. Chiron raised an eyebrow at my sudden intrusion. Yes. Where's Tartarus? Chiron chuckled. You haven't been here before, have you? I shook my head. As I did so, I noticed that Tyson seemed to have a pained expression on his face. Glancing from Chiron to Tyson, I figured out what he was thinking. Despite the fact that he was a bit taller than myself, I patted him on the shoulder. Let it go, Tyson. Tyson looked down at me, his look turned to one of pleading. But, Pony, just let it go. Chiron sniffed. Young Cyclops, I am a centaur. I tilted my head in confusion. Horseman said what? Chiron gave me a confused glance. What? Percy and Annabeth chuckled at that. While Chiron looked between the three of us, Annabeth was the first to stop laughing, and become a bit more serious. I'm sorry Chiron, Naruto doesn't know much of anything about the Greek gods. Hopefully you'll be able to teach him a thing or two to help him understand. Chiron looked pained, which made Percy look at him nervously. You are going to be able to help teach him, right? Chiron shook his head. Sadly, I will be unable to assist in the teaching of heroes for the time being. I have been relieved of duty, as it were. You got fired? Annabeth asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Chiron nodded, which seemed to make Percy agitated. But, who's going to teach the heroes here? You've been doing it for years now, no one else could possibly take your place. Chiron shook his head. I'm sorry, Percy, but it's not my choice. The Olympian Council has already determined my fate. When Zeus heard that the tree he'd made from his daughter's spirit was poisoned, he had to see someone punished. As of now, I am no longer the camp activities director of this camp. Wait, what? I asked. I was not liking the fact that I was being left completely in the dark. I've been left in the dark before. But I at least had some idea of what might be happening. I had more trust in the world around me. But now, I was in a different place, with different rules than I was used to. And I knew nothing about what was going on. Chiron frowned. Surely you've heard something of the Olympians. I shrugged. Not much. I mean, I know that the kids here are supposed to be their children. But that's pretty much all I know. Annabeth sighed. Well, then we have a lot to catch you up on. Chiron nodded, filling the last of his possessions into his saddlebag. Unfortunately, you'll have to do it without me. I will keep looking for a possible cure. Perhaps my journey to my kinsmen in the Everglades will prove fruitful, as they may know of something I may have overlooked. The tree only has maybe a few weeks less, unless. Unless what? Annabeth asked. Chiron shook his head. No, it's just a thought. There is a possible source of magic that would be strong enough to reverse the poison's effects. But it was lost centuries ago. And that would be? I asked, letting the question hang in the air. Chiron ignored me, pressing the stop button on his box. I stared at the box in surprise as the music suddenly stopped. Okay, that was weird. Chiron, what sort of magic can do this? Please tell us, Percy said, a pleading look in his eyes. Chiron sighed. Percy, I nay. You to promise me that you won't act rashly. I told your mother that you shouldn't come here this summer. It's too dangerous. Oh yeah, and the world outside this camp is all the better. I muttered. Chiron shook his head. Better safe with his family than in danger here. But, since you are here, stay here. Train hard. Learn to fight. But do not leave. Are you insane? I asked, receiving a glare from Annabeth. I ignored her. You just told him that it was too dangerous here, and that you warned his mom about coming. But then a moment later, you just turn around and say don't leave. MIT. He only one who is failing to see how he came to this conclusion. Percy shook his head. Chiron's right. If I'd stayed at home, I'd have been safer. But now that I'm here, I can train. I can fight. And that's what really matters right now. We need to protect the camp to make sure it isn't overrun by monsters. Never mind. You're both nuts. I muttered. Was it really that hard to understand? When someone tells you that a place is bad, you stay away. However, Chiron seemed totally at ease with telling Percy that what he did was wrong, and then turning around and saying that he had no other choice but to stay. Not that I wouldn't break their rules to do what right. It was just too confusing to know which rules to break. Chiron chuckled. Perhaps I have gone a bit nuts, as you so delicately put it. However, I am also right. Percy should. Time out, I said. Chiron didn't seem pleased by my interrupting him, but didn't say anything as I continued. Why do you keep saying that? Saying what? Percy this, and Percy that. What is Percy to you guys? Annabeth sighed. Percy is one of the children of the Big Three, the direct descendants of the Titan Lord. They are powerful gods, and their children are just as powerful. What does that have to do with Percy? There's some prophecy that I'm not supposed to be told about that involves me either saving or destroying Olympus. Percy said, adding his 2 cents to the conversation. A sudden noise caught our attention, with Chiron, Percy, and Annabeth ignoring it for the most part. Me and Tyson on the other hand jumped slightly at the noise. What was that? I asked. The dinner conch. Chiron replied. He turned to Annabeth. Stay with Percy, child. Keep him safe. I need you to swear to me that you will keep Percy from harm. Swear on the river Styx. There's a river of Styx here. I whispered to Tyson. He just shrugged, obviously as confused as I was. But Chiron, you told me that the gods made you immortal. So long as you were needed to train heroes. If they dismissed you from camp. Swear that you will do your best to keep Percy from harm, he insisted. Swear upon the river Styx. Annabeth looked dejected. I swear upon the river Styx. There was the sound of thunder outside the cabin. I couldn't help but growl. Seriously, what the heck is wrong with this place? I keep on hearing thunder, and there's not a cloud in the sky. Everyone, except Tyson, who looked just as confused as I felt, laughed at that. It felt a little forced, but I suppose it was better than nothing considering the situation. Boy, you will understand in time. Now go to dinner. You should meet your new camp counselor Tantalus there, Chiron said as he walked out the door. We all watched him walk out of the building, a small sense of dread filling me as he went. It was almost like our last real line of defense was gone. Annabeth had tears slowly beginning to fall, and Tyson looked like he was going to start cry as well. A moment after the door closed behind Chiron, I clutched my head in frustration. What just happened? Percy backed away from me a bit. I don't know. Annabeth didn't seem to be taking my sudden meltdown very well either. Tears rolling down her face faster than before. What's wrong? Oh, nothing, I said, trying to avoid the desire to wreck everything in the room. I've just gotten out of somewhere dark and dreary, only to end up in a place I've never heard of before. Then, I get attacked by a monster, who is yelling at me to join some army while trying to kill me. Then I get the opportunity to almost get robbed while trying to get something to eat. Oh, and that's not all. I then travel in a metal death trap that nearly crashes at least 50 times. After surviving that, I get attacked by giant metal fire-breathing bulls, and find out that my first friend here is half goat. And then, only then, do I get to meet the only person who might be able to help me right now. Thing is, I don't learn anything. Do you think that you would take any of that very well? Poor Annabeth was at a loss of words, tears still rolling down her face. Percy had managed to get himself wedged into a corner, looking at me with a terrified expression. Tyson seemed to be the only one not affected by my outburst of anger. In fact, he looked like he was confused, and oddly happy. Suddenly, there was a twisting feeling in my gut as a loud groaning noise erupted around us. I couldn't tell where exactly the noise was coming from, but the suddenness of the noise snapped me out of my frustration-induced spiel. My gut quickly unclenched as I looked around the room. What was that? I dunno, Tyson said, glancing about the room. Something smells good. What? I sniffed the air experimentally. I'm not good at sensing things, or increasing my senses, but even I could smell that faint smell. It was strange, like a combination of baking bread, cooked meat, and cheese. I took a deep breath, my mouth beginning to salivate at the smell. Naruto, I'm sorry, Annabeth said, falling to the floor. I looked towards them, finally noticing their expressions, and the feeling rolling off of them. They were terrified. It didn't take long for me to figure out just what they were terrified of, seeing as I'd just completely lost it on them. I knelt down beside Annabeth. I'm sorry, I just lost it. I've been having a bad day. And no one really seems to be able to do anything to help me figure out what to do. So, you aren't mad anymore? Percy asked, slowly easing his way towards me. I scratched the back of my head. Yeah, I'm good now. Sorry about that little freak out. Percy nodded. I suppose he used to being left in the dark, seeing as he was just as confused about some of the things that Chiron talked about as I was. He walked over to Annabeth, helping her up as she started to get more control of herself. The look in her eyes was one of terror, as well as anguish. As I watched her collect herself, I had a sudden epiphany. She and Chiron had been close. Now I felt really bad. Not only had I hurt them, but I'd hurt them while they were already in pain. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Realize what? Annabeth asked. She was still a little shaky, but looked more composed than I felt. Chiron, I didn't realize that you were so close to him. Another look of pain crossed her face. He was like a father to me. A sudden relaxing feeling flowed through my head. I saw a man, with goggles on his head looking at me with a happy look on his face. Little Annabeth stood in front of a fire, showing it before tearing the picture in half and throwing it onto a small fire that was glowing in front of her. There was someone else there, someone I couldn't quite see yet. Right before I saw who was there, I was suddenly brought out of my thoughts by Tyson tapping me on the shoulder. You okay? I rubbed my forehead with a sigh. Yeah, I just have a headache. I glanced up at him. Thanks for the concern. Tyson smiled. We go eat now. Percy and Annabeth looked at each other, sharing a strange look with each other. Finally, after a moment of their staring, Percy spoke up. Sure, big guy. Let's go get some food. I stood in the shadows of one of the columns, watching the procession of people. I still didn't know much about how things worked here, but I was pretty sure that since I was new I should probably wait. Plus, Percy and Tyson seemed to be fine with waiting. Well, Tyson was. Percy was just looking over the campers with a sad look. For the most part, everyone was fine. If Annabeth was still shaken up, she was no longer showing it. She walked tall as she led the members of her cabin to the food line. She didn't look like the oldest, but he definitely had the air of someone in command. I did find that it was amazing how so many people could have the same color of hair and eyes, while looking so vastly different. Then again, it was probably because their parent was the same. Athena, if I remembered right. Following her group, was the other girl, Clarice. She had a nice little cut on her cheek, along with one of her arms in a sling. She stood taut with a very confident look in her eyes as she led her group forward. There was some sort of sign on her back that I'm guessing was an insult of some sort. It wasn't really a nice thing to do. Especially since she had helped take down the bulls that could have destroyed it. I wonder what idiot is in charge here. I took my eyes off the campers going to get their food, and took a look at the two people sitting at the table at the head of the group. One man was in a spotted multicolored shirt, nice shorts, and shoes with dark cloth sticking out of the top. He had a pudgy belly, as well as a red splotchy face. That reminded me somewhat of Tsunade after a long night of drinking and working the slots. Well, getting played by the slots. Behind him was another half-man, half-goat man. I couldn't remember what they were called, though on my behalf, I was only told what they were called once. He stood behind the pudgy man, peeling some red fruit of some kind and handing it to him. I've never seen fruits or vegetables, I can't really tell which like them before. Sitting besides him was a pale, stick-thin man. He had bags under his eyes, dirty fingernails, and gray hair. That looked like someone had hacked away at it with a serrated kunai. There was also that strange feeling in me, like I could tell what he was feeling. Hungry, angry, frustrated. I don't think I've ever felt like that before. Especially not at the same time. And then, there was his orange jumpsuit. I couldn't help but palm my face as I looked him over. Do I look that bad in orange? Nah, I make orange look good. I thought with a chuckle as I noticed that Percy and Tyson were heading towards the food line. Jogging slightly to catch up, I couldn't help but notice the looks we were getting as we walked past. Or rather, the looks Tyson was getting as we walked past. I grimaced at the realization that despite the obvious fact that he'd just saved them earlier, no one was willing to trust him. Who invited that here? Someone muttered. Unfortunately for them, I saw who said it and was more than willing to go over and knock his teeth out. Luckily for him, Tyson noticed and put his hand on my shoulder. With a small sigh, I reluctantly returned to following him and Percy. I did make a point to remember the unlucky kid's face so I could get some form of revenge on him later. Well, if it isn't Peter Johnson. My millennium is complete, the fat man said, an almost disgusted look on his face. I glanced around. Seeing no one, I turned back to the fat man. Who? Percy looked, and felt, furious for some reason. My mind mulled it over for a second, before drawing a blank on it. The fat man chuckled. I'm talking to the young man next to you. I glanced at Percy, the wheels turning in my head. Surprisingly, I was actually able to figure out what he was doing. He was insulting Percy. A small smirk formed as I turned back to him. Oh, I get it. So, anything else I should know, fat man? I could practically hear a pin drop at that comment. The fat man looked shocked, then angry that I would just call him that. The man sitting next to him looked at me curiously, almost like he expected me to suddenly blow up or something. What did you say? The fat man asked slowly. I shrugged. I don't know your name. So unless I know your name, you can't really blame me for thinking of some other way to remember you, fat man. He seemed to fume for a moment. Then, he suddenly started chuckling. You're a strange kid. He stood up, giving me an appraising look over before speaking. My name is Dionysus, but the kids here call me Mr. D. Nice to meet you, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I said, holding out my hand. After a tense second, he shook it. Naruto, I've already heard quite a bit about your heroic actions this morning. The skinny man said, giving me a disgusted look. Then, a cold smile crossed his face. I am Tantalus, on special assignment here until my lord Dionysus decides otherwise. I nodded. Nice to meet you, Tantalus. Tantalus snorted, glaring at me. However, his gaze quickly fell on Percy. And I've heard a great deal about you, Perseus Jackson. I do expect you to refrain from any trouble. Quote, trouble, Percy said, in a rather demanding voice. Mr. D snapped his fingers, a paper appearing from thin air. He handed it to me, allowing me to get a good look at the title heading. Troubled Kid Torches Gymnasium. I scratched my head at that. I've never heard of a gymnasium before. Yes, trouble, Tantalus said with a slimy tone to his voice. You caused plenty of that last summer. I understand. Percy felt mad again, so I decided to do something impulsive and probably stupid. I gave Tantalus one of my trademark fox-like grins. Trouble, you mean like turning the camp upside down? Tantalus blinked. Something like that. A goat man walked by nervously, setting a plate of food in front of Tantalus. Tantalus licked his lips as he stared at the food. I myself was trying not to drool over the food. It just smelt so good, and I was surprisingly still hungry despite the fact that I'd already eaten cheeseburgers earlier. Tantalus looked at the empty goblet and said, root beer. Barks Special Stock. 1967. To my surprise, the previously empty goblet was suddenly filled with a brown bubbly liquid. He seemed hesitant to touch it, like he was expecting to get burnt. Go on, then, old fellow. Mr. D said with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Maybe it'll work this time. As Tantalus reached forward, the goblet suddenly raced down the table. He seemed to notice a few drops on the table, but as he reached forward to touch them, they speed off. Growling in frustration, he stabbed a utensil at the food. Similar to the goblet, the plate moved away from his utensil. After he made another stab at it, the plate rushed towards me and leapt into my hands. Blast! Give me that plate! Tantalus yelled, almost lunging over the table to get to the food. I took a step back. The full aroma of the food hitting my nose. Oh no you don't, this smells too good. Besides, it likes me better. Mr. D didn't bother concealing his laughter as Tantalus sat back down with a scowl on his face. Dearie me, I'm sorry about that. Perhaps, another few days. Believe me, old chap, working here will be torture enough for you. I'm sure your curse will wear off in time. Until then, remind me to stick around, this food is great. I said, as I dug into the food with my fingers. I knew that there was some kind of utensil I was supposed to use, since everyone else was using them. There was just one problem, they weren't the chopsticks I was used to. Tantalus glared at me. Do you know how long I've gone without food, or drink? I don't believe that someone like you can comprehend being parched for 3,000 years. I shook my head. Nope, and I hope I never do. This is too delicious to give it up anytime soon. Tantalus grumbled while Mr. D grinned. Naruto. I do believe that we should get along just fine. Do you know who your godparent is? I shook my head, causing him to sigh. A shame. I did so want to thank whichever one of my siblings sired you. I shrugged. Maybe they'll send a note or something. He chuckled at that. Yes, maybe they will. His gaze then drifted towards Percy. Peter, go sit down. The pizza tonight is absolutely divine. Percy had a confused look on his face, but seemed to understand what Dionysus was saying. He turned to the table that Mr. D had indicated. Come on, Tyson. Oh, no, Tantalus said. The monster stays here. We must decide what to do with it. I glanced at Mr. D who shrugged. He didn't care what happened, he just wanted a show. Him, Percy said through gritted teeth. His name is Tyson. Tantalus raised an eyebrow. I quickly got the message he was trying to give. Am I supposed to care? I grabbed Tyson's arm. Come on Tyson, we're going to sit down and eat. What do you think you're doing? Tantalus hissed, glaring daggers at me. I shrugged off his killing intent, as I gave Tyson and Percy a push towards Percy's table. Ignoring you. Tantalus grabbed my arm, the plate in my hand. Leaping into the fire just a few feet away. I am the activities director. I will not be made a fool of. Especially not by some ungrateful. I had already stopped listening to him, my eyes on the FL. Aims that were currently eating the food I'd been eating. Turning my attention back to him, I unleashed my killing intent on him. And unlike him, I'd been trained in how to manipulate killing intent to get various results. The result I was currently going for was fear. I was still eating that. I growled, concentrating on the image I wanted Tantalus to see. Channeling my chakra up his arm, I let it get carried away into his own chakra system. Then, with a little tweaking of the image in my head, I let loose the image of the Shinigami overshadowing me. The result was instantaneous. Tantalus jumped away from me, knocking over the table on his way back. Mr. D gave me a curious look. Yes, you are definitely an interesting person, Naruto. I do think that our time together will be most enlightening. You'd think that would give me a good feeling about how things at camp were going to go from there. It didn't. I had to drag Percy and Tyson away from the head table to their own table. Percy looked like he wanted to argue with me, but was probably afraid that I'd go nuts again. He was probably right. Tyson, on the other hand, was glancing between me and Percy with a smile on his face. "We're sitting together?" he asked. I grinned back. "Yeah, Tyson, we're sitting together." That seemed to break Percy from his stupor, as he suddenly began to sputter. "No, we're supposed to sit at our own tables." I gave him a confused look. "Isn't that what I'm doing?" Percy shook his head. "The gods have all sorts of issues with each other, and don't really like their children sitting at other gods' tables. Hermes is the exception, because he's the god of travelers. And, I'm supposed to care if they care which table I sit at because." Percy blinked. That's how it's always been." I shook my head. "I've heard better excuses than that. Now, if your parent doesn't mind, I'd like to eat now." Percy mumbled under his breath. "I'm not sure what Poseidon will do to you." I gave him a shove towards his table, almost knocking him over the bench. He managed to catch himself in time to set himself down with myself and Tyson. A moment later, a strange-looking man walked over with a circular object. I'd pretty much given up on trying to understand what half of the stuff in this camp was. I'd probably do better waiting and getting Percy or Annabeth to explain when the man was gone. As the man left, however, I was too busy poking and prodding the circular object. It looked like bread, but it was covered in a yellow substance like what had been on my cheeseburger. I'm guessing it's the cheese. The thing that got the more part of my attention was the black stuff on it. Black usually meant that the food was bad, right? So why would they give us bad food? Then again, I wouldn't put it past Tantalus to try and poison us. Percy and Tyson both took a piece of it and walked towards a small fire. I grabbed a piece, somewhat surprised that it just came apart like that, and followed them. RCY then took a piece of it and scrapped it into the fire, Tyson following shortly after. Percy said something like a chant, with Tyson repeating it a moment after, "Poseidon, accept my offering." I'd watched a few other people do something similar, saying different names as they scrapped their food into the fire. I thought about it for a moment before scrapping a bit into the fire. "Olympians, please accept my offering. And could someone help me get some answers?" I mentally added before walking back to Percy's table. Percy was picking at his food while Tyson was sticking each piece into his mouth delicately. Like he was afraid that they would fall apart in his hands. With his hands, I wouldn't doubt it. I picked up my own piece, taking a small bit of it. A grin crossed my face as I put a bit more in my mouth. "This stuff isn't half bad." Percy twiddled his thumbs for a moment, glancing at me and Tyson. Once he seemed sure nothing was going to happen, he relaxed. "Hey Naruto." I glanced up at him. A stringy bit of cheese still stuck to the food in my mouth. "Yeah, were you serious when you said you didn't know who the gods were?" I nodded, a small chuckle slipping out. "I kinda crash-landed here. So I don't really know much of anything." "Why, what's up?" Nothing. It just kind of explains why you seem to have no fear of any of the gods. You even stood up to Dionysus and didn't blink." "Who? Mr. D. He's a god?" I asked, my eyes turning towards Mr. D with an appraising look. He seemed normal enough, but there was something that seemed a bit off to him. Like he was trying to hide or something like that. He's not too bad. You don't know the half of what he and the other gods can do." Percy muttered. I grinned. "Enlighten me." We spent the rest of dinner talking about the history to the gods. Well, Percy talked. I was still eating and after a long day, felt content to sit and listen. He told me about the titans who turned out to be the gods' parents, some of the monsters he'd encountered, and a few of the heroes that he knew about. These heroes included the heroic actions he took the year before to retrieve Zeus's lightning bolt. Apparently it was a big deal. As everything began to wind down, I nodded my head. I see. So these geek gods. Greek. Percy whispered through clenched teeth, his eyes wide with fear. Right. Greek. Sorry. Anyways, so these gods are still around. And having kids. Oh, except for the big three, who are supposedly the strongest of the three, because of some treaty. And that's only because they were trying to prevent a prophecy. But failed when you and Talia were born. That about right. Percy nodded. You've got a pretty good memory, Naruto. I scratched the back of my head nervously. I have gotten praise before. But it still made me feel uncomfortable. Of course, it usually wasn't my intelligence that was getting complimented. Come to think of it, I usually didn't get a chance to expand my intelligence, seeing as I was generally focusing on my physical training. Though, I had been getting better with some of the things I'd been learning under the tutelage of Pervy Sage. A small knot formed in my gut as I remembered him. It felt like forever since I'd seen him. Especially I didn't know how long I'd been stuck in limbo. For all I know, years could have gone by, and I would be none the wiser. Hey Naruto, you okay? Tyson asked. I shook my head, trying my best to put on a happy face. Yeah, just thinking of some stuff. It's nothing, really. Tyson looked a bit happier, and took another bite of his food. Suddenly, a loud noise sounded through the dining area. It took everything in me to avoid letting my natural instinct to throw my non-existent kunai at the sound. Glancing over, I saw ATYR. Percy was kind enough to fill me in, though he appeared sad as he talked about them holding a shell horn, blowing into it as everyone's attention was drawn towards Tantalus and Mr. D. Tantalus stood, his frail form looking almost like a shadow against the flames if it weren't for his orange suit. Yes, well, Tantalus said as talking began to die out. Another fine meal, or so I'm told. I chuckled as he tried to sneak towards a nearby plate only to have it shoot away as soon as he got within a half a foot of it. And here on my first day of authority, I'd like to say what a pleasant form of punishment it is to be here. Tantalus continued. I blinked in confusion. Punishment is pleasant. Since when? Over the course of the summer, I hope to torture, interact with each and every one of you children. You all look good enough to eat. Tantalus said, sending a particularly nasty glare at me. I just grinned my usual fox-like grin in response. I still knew nothing of Tantalus, and his past. But I knew enough to know that while his threats were just as real as Zabuza's or even Orochimaru's, he couldn't do anything to carry out those threats. If he could, he probably wouldn't be working here in the first place. Mr. D clapped lightheartedly, a few other people from the other tables joining in. Most of them looked a bit disturbed by what Tantalus had said, though I can't say why. Percy had told me that this was a training camp for heroes, so someone like him really shouldn't have been too much of a hassle for them. Then again, they were in training. And now some changes. Tantalus gave everyone a crooked grin. We are reinstituting the chariot races. Murmuring broke out amongst the tables. I blinked in surprise as I suddenly felt a surge of emotion from everyone. For the most part, all I felt was fear. However, as I looked at some of the other cabin members' faces, there were looks of excitement at the prospect of this chariot race. I leaned over to Percy. Can he do that on his first day? Percy shrugged. I don't know, I've never met an authority figure who did something like this before. Now I know that these races were discontinued some years ago due to, technical problems. Tantalus said, a slimy grin crossing his face. 3 deaths and 26 mutilations. One of the Apollo kids said. I shook my head. Those did not sound like the kind of statistics I'd want to hear when going through an activity. Then again, the Chunin exam wasn't much better. Especially when I remembered the Forest of Death, and all its friends. I shuddered at the memory of the giant snake that had eaten me when I'd taken the exam 2 years ago. Cammy, has it really only been that long? It doesn't feel like that long. Tantalus looked positively pleased by the facts that the son of Apollo had told us. Yes, but I know that you will all join me in welcoming the return of this camp tradition. Golden laurels will go to the winning charioteers each month. Teams may register in the morning. The first race will be held in 3 days' time. We will release you from most of your regular activities to prepare your chariots and choose your horses. Oh, and did I mention? The victorious team's cabin will have no chores for the month in which they win. Everyone seemed to suddenly become far more animated by this prospect. Apparently, no chores was a good incentive for people do something life-threatening, and from the sounds of it, pretty stupid. However, not everyone seemed to be so happy about this, as I felt a sudden spike of anger from one of the tables. I turned towards it, and realized it was Clarice. I noticed that she was at the Ares table, the god of war if I remembered correctly. This piqued my interest. After all, if she was a child of the god of war, why would she seem opposed to something like this? But, sir, Clarice yelled, nervousness rolling off of her as she stood up. Some of the other kids at the other tables seemed rather amused by something. But I couldn't tell what. She glanced at a few of the other members of her table before speaking. What about patrol duty? I mean, if we drop everything to ready our chariots. Ah, the hero of the day, Tantalus said. Cutting her off. Brave Clarice, who single-handedly bested the bronze bulls. Clarice looked startled, as a blush crossed her face. I didn't. And modest too. Tantalus grinned. Say what? I said, scratching my head in confusion. Tantalus and a few other people gave me a somewhat confused glance. My guess would be that he wasn't really expecting me, or anyone for that matter, to cut him off. What's the matter, boy? I shrugged. I dunno, I mean, Clarice is definitely the hero of the day. If it weren't for her, those bulls definitely would have gotten into the camp and destroyed it. Wouldn't you say that she showed good judgment, and that you should trust that judgment in the defense of the camp? I had no idea of half of the stuff I'd said. But judging by the looks I was getting, it was the right thing to say. Clarice gave me a grateful look, before looking at Tantalus with a resolute stare. Tantalus had lost whatever sway he'd had over the camp in that moment. And I was not going to let him get it back without a fight. Tantalus growled. While I'm certain that is true, I am the activities director, and as such will make the final decisions on such matters. I put my hand on my chin in a thinking manner. You know, I heard this was a camp for heroes in training. Aren't heroes supposed to exercise good leadership skills? I grinned. So wouldn't putting something like this to a vote make a good test of leadership and devotion? Tantalus looked torn. On the one hand, I had his hands tied with the entire camp looking at him with a curious gaze. On the other hand was his own desires, ones that probably wouldn't end well for members of the camp. I was feeling quite happy with my new skill of feeling people's emotions, because feeling his frustration was all the more satisfying. Twisting his face into a smile, Tantalus nodded. All right then, I do believe that a compromise is in order. For all of those who desire to participate in the chariot race, you may sign up tomorrow at the big house. The same goes for those who wish to do border patrol. Just go in and sign up, nothing to it. Clarice seemed to think it over, chewing on her lip. I could feel the conflicting fears and doubts floating about from everyone. No one was really sure of what to think of it. After all, it was a lot to take in. Mulling it over in my head for a moment, I stood up. Mr. D, I'd like to request tonight's night shift. I know I just got here, but I'll take any opportunity to help those who've helped me. I promise to do everything I can to help out, and I never go back on my word. A few of the tables burst into sporadic conversation as to what I was doing. The Ares table weren't all giving me the best of looks, but there were more than a few who were smiling and nodding. Clarice in particular looked quite relieved to hear that someone was backing her up on this issue. A few of the other boys turned to her and started discussing something with her. She seemed to be trying to keep up her strong image, but she looked dead on her feet. In fact, I was somewhat surprised to see she was still on her feet. Mr. D gave me an approach. Oving look that soon had me scratching the back of my head nervously. I had only been in the camp for a day, and I was already getting the approval of one of the gods. How awesome am I? Yes, well, thank you for that. Now, back to other pressing issues. Tantalus said, regaining his composure. Before we proceed to the campfire and sing along, one slight housekeeping issue. Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase have seen fit, for some reason, to bring this here. Tantalus motioned towards Tyson. This, I asked, rage quickly coursing through me as I heard some of the random conversations that were springing up. I began to stand, but found a weight on my back was holding me down. Percy had practically leapt across the table to sit me back down, and not cause a scene. Yes, that, Tantalus said, ignoring my outburst. You see, Cyclops have a reputation for being bloodthirsty monsters with a very small brain capacity. Bigger than yours, I muttered under my breath. Tantalus didn't notice, as he continued his little speech. Under normal circumstances, I would release this beast into the woods and have you hunt it down with torches and pointed sticks. By this point, Tyson had joined Percy in holding me down. They both were straining slightly as I glared daggers at Tantalus. He talked about monsters and beasts, but he didn't really know them. After all, Tyson was one of those who'd helped save the camp. But who knows? Perhaps this Cyclops is not as horrible as most of its brethren. Until it proves worthy of destruction, we need a place to keep it. Tyson, I growled. Everyone looked at me. Most were no longer surprised by my cutting Tantalus off by this point. His name is Tyson. Tantalus smirked, opening his mouth to make some smart retort. Before he could speak, a low groaning noise filled the camp. Everyone glanced around, trying to identify the source of the noise. I took some deep breaths, trying to calm down. Whatever this was, it had happened before when I'd gotten angry in the big house. The last thing we needed was more panic. As my heart rate slowed down, the groaning noise slowly ebbed away. Tantalus and Mr. D both gave me a curious glance, but then moved on to more important matters. Yes, as I was saying, it needs a place to sleep. I'd suggest the stables, but it might spook the horses. Perhaps, the Hermes cabin. I shook my head, glancing back at Percy and Tyson. I'm good guys. You can let go now. You sure? Percy asked, his grip loosening just a bit. Tyson on the other hand, just removed his hand and gave me one of his toothy grins. Yeah, I'm sure. Surely there is something it can do. Perhaps menial chores or the like. Come now, there must be somewhere that we can kennel it. I swear, he was asking for someone to rip off his head. I was more than willing to. But had my attention drawn to the campers as everyone gasped. I glanced behind me, looking through the tree line. There didn't appear to be anything startling. I gave myself a once-over. Same as I always did. I looked over at Percy and Tyson. And understood a bit better what they were shocked by. There, glowing over Tyson's head, was a green three-pronged spear-like weapon. Percy had explained that a similar symbol had appeared over his own head during his previous year. It was the sign of Poseidon. The sign of his, and now Tyson's, father. Tantalus roared with laughter, cutting through the mystified feeling that had swept over the camp. Well, that solves where it will be staying. By the gods, I can see the family resemblance. By this point, everyone else was laughing as well. I noticed that Annabeth, Clarice, and a few other people weren't laughing, and silently thanked them. Things were going to get interesting around here, of that much I was certain. I stood on the far side of the boundary, dressed in the Greeks' traditional armor. Despite the fact that I was obviously no threat to them, most of the campers seemed to be untrusting towards me. Then again, someone poisons a tree. Then metal bulls attack and a random guy comes to the rescue. I would probably be a little suspicious myself. After a short discussion, they had eventually come to the deck. Isn't to have me guard this particular area. And when I say, this particular area, I mean the same area Clarice was guarding. I guess they thought she'd guard me best. I looked down at the armor they'd given me. I was wearing a bronze breastplate, with a pair of leather arm and shin guards. I decided not to wear the helmet since I'd seen just how much protection that had against the special abilities some monsters apparently had. To complete my look, one of their swords was strapped to a leather belt that hung freely at my side. I fiddled with the sword absent-mindedly. It didn't give me as much comfort as my kunai pouch did. But it was definitely better than nothing. I glanced at Clarice, an uncomfortable silence forming as she said nothing, her eyes scanning our surroundings. With nothing better to do, I slowly drew the blade and began to inspect it. Now, I'm not really much of a swordsman myself since I'm a ninja. There aren't many ninja who really used swords, but those ninja who did were experts at using them. If you were just practicing though, even someone like me could swing a sword around and get a feel for how it moves. Moving in a small circle, I gave it a few test swings. The weight of it wasn't really that bad, though there was a bit too much in the blade. I noticed that the way the celestial bronze felt was eerily similar way to the way that most kunai's weight felt. In essence, it really was just an oversized kunai. I took another couple of swings, soon realizing that it was a bit heavier than it looked. If I wanted to throw it, it probably wouldn't go the way I wanted it to. Meaning that this was supposed to be a close combat weapon. I growled as I tried to turn the odd weight placement to my advantage, turning a fumbling swing into a torrent of slash. That would hopefully push an opponent back. As I stopped, I felt a sense of exhilaration. I could practically feel everything around me, my eyes darting back and forth along the length of the valley that led to the camp. I felt alive. A slow clap drew me out of my elated state. I glanced back towards the clapping. Clarice stood there, a look of amusement on her face. I'd forgotten she was there. Shaking my head, I gave her the best serious look I could. What? Oh, nothing, Clarice said. It's just that the way you swing that sword, I never would have known that this was your first time wielding one. I raised an eyebrow at that. Are you mocking me? She had a small smirk on her face, like she was going to say something witty. Then, a tired look overtook her previous expression. The feeling of frustration and disappointment slowly rolled off of her in slow waves. I wondered what was making her feel that way, but decided that it probably would be smarter to not say anything. After a moment of silence, she shrugged. Not really. You aren't a natural with a sword, but with a bit of work you could be taking on monsters in no time. But right now, your swings are wild. If a monster were to attack, you'd be better off beating it with your fists like you did with the bull. Oh, there wasn't much more I could say about it. After thinking it over, I decided her answer was nice. She wasn't really saying I was bad. Just that I needed to improve. Her gaze turned towards the hillside, sighing softly. This is nuts. Which part? The tree dying, the new counselor, the attacking monsters? Or the fact that you're on guard duty with me? I asked. Clarice growled at me, a heated glare leveled at me. None of your business. I rubbed my chin thoughtfully, ignoring her glare. Personally, both counselors have been pretty useless. I mean, one was as informative as a rock, and the one we have now is as dumb as a rock. Clarice blinked in surprise. Then she laughed lightly. Yeah, Chiron's riddles can get a bit annoying at times, but he means well. I shook my head. I'm not sure I believe that. Why not? I sighed. Before he left, he told us that he had an idea of some object that could cure the tree's poison. But when me and Percy asked him, he just shook us off and started telling him to stay at camp because of some prophecy. It just doesn't make sense. Clarice said nothing, returning her gaze towards the valley between the road and Camp Half-Blood. I guess she'd decided to ignore me. With nothing better to do, I kept swinging my sword around in the wild way I had before. After goofing off with the sword for about 10 minutes, I decided to up the practice. Grinning from ear to ear, I put my hands into the very familiar cross-shaped position. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A small poof of smoke filled the area around me. After a couple of seconds, 8 replicas stepped forward. I scratched my cheek in confusion. Wasn't I trying to make 10 clones? Oh well, what in the God's name did you just do? I glanced back to Clarice, who had grabbed her spear and was holding it in a defensive position. My eyes widened slightly as I noticed that there was a small spark of electricity building up around the tip of the spear. And with the scowl on her face, I wasn't really willing to make a mess of things. Unfortunately, all of my clones were following the same thoughts as I was. Not a second after I opened my mouth to speak, at least 4 of my clones broke out into chattering. Soon, all of them were talking, making animated motions with their hands to try and get some point across. With all the chaos they were causing though, I almost forgot what I was supposed to be explaining. Luckily, or unluckily, Clarice did not forget. One of my clones got too close to her, still trying to help explain. In a flash of motion, the clone suddenly had a large gash in its neck. All of the clones instantly stopped talking as they watched the other clone struggle for a couple of seconds in pain and confusion before the clone finally dispelled. I placed my hand to my throat, an odd feeling going through me. Like I really knew what it was to die like that. Remembering just who had killed my clone. The clones and I raised out hands in surrender as Clarice leveled her spear at us, lightning now freely dancing about on the spear's tip. What did you do? Clarice growled. I raised an eyebrow in confusion. Other people here can't do this. No they can't, you moron. What, did you think this was how everyone reacts to normal stuff? I shrugged. This is the first time I've done this here. So I wouldn't know. I mean, it's just a clone technique. Clarice lowered her spear a bit. A what? You know, a clone technique. Like water clones, earth clones, or even my own shadow clones. Their chakra constructs people can use for various purposes. I explained. Despite the fact that I was mentally applauding myself for remembering the different types of solid clones, I was also concerned. Instead of becoming more at ease, Clarice seemed to look more confused and tense. I decided I should simplify it a bit more. They're copies of me. That's not possible, Clarice said, poking one of my clones with her spear. The lightning on her spear jumped onto the clone's breastplate. The clone jumped in surprise. Watch it. That hurts, you know. How? Clarice asked, backing up slightly. That's a good question, I said, poking the clone nearest to me. He looked somewhat uncomfortable, but then, I'm sure I'd be acting the same way if someone was scrutinizing me. Sort of like a paradox where I can watch myself, while feeling my own scrutiny. I don't think too much of it. Gives me a headache. Not really seeing anything different about the clone, I pulled him to the side. Defense only. The clone pouted at my command. Fine. We both got into ready stances, eyeing each other for a second before I rushed forward. Since my defense has never been good, my clone stumbled back as he attempted to block my blows. I did everything I could to hit the clone, coming in at odd angles, spinning around to hit harder, even kicking at him a couple of times to throw him off balance. He just saw through my different attacks, and countered in whatever way he could. I saw that his form, my form, stupid paradox was sloppy, and I quickly found an opening. Charging forward, my blade sped towards my clone's now unprotected neck. A moment too late, my clone saw and tried to dodge. Instead of taking his head off like I'd planned, my blade cut into my clone's shoulder. I quickly understood just how effective the blade was, as it nearly cut through the bone in my clone's right arm. There was just one problem. My clone didn't go poof like normal. Instead, it fell backwards onto its butt, clenching its teeth to prevent itself from crying out in pain as blood slowly seeped from the wound. I was immediately at its side, grabbing the wounded arm and trying to stop the blood from flowing out. My clone glared at me. What the heck was that? I don't know. I shook my head, trying to remember the description of his shadow clone jutsu from the scroll of sealing. Going over it in my head, I couldn't think of anything that would explain what was going on. Hold up. My clone grabbed my shoulder with his good arm. Let's try something. I looked at my clone in confusion. Until I noticed the right side of his badly was disappearing. My eyes widened as he slowly faded into nothing. Then, I felt his energy suddenly roll through me. My arm felt like it was sore, but it was completely uninjured. Then the really strange thing happened. I saw myself rushing forward, swinging wildly, hacking at my clone's, arm. Do I always look that angry when I'm fighting? Though as I turned towards my other clones. They had a startled expression on their faces. Boss. Did you see that? Yourself, attacking yourself. I nodded. This isn't normal. This world changed the shadow clone jutsu. Plus, seeing stuff like that usually doesn't happen. Which can only mean one thing. All of my clones looked at each other. Then, a look of realization crossed their faces. His shadow clone jutsu is now even more awesome. They yelled, pumping their fists into the air. I grinned. That's right. Now, let's test out just how much we can do. There's 6 of you left, so we'll split into 3 groups of 2. You 2 go patrol the hillside side, and make sure to let us know if anything is coming. You 2 practice with your swords. If I'm right, we should get better as you guys practice. And you 2 practice tree walking. Do we have 2? One of the tree walking clones whined, while the other snickered. I nodded. We were stuck doing nothing for a long time, so I'm out of practice with my control. I tried making 10 clones, but I only made 8. Wait a minute, why am I explaining this to you? Why don't you know what I'm thinking? My clone gave me a shamed grin. I forgot. I smacked the back of his head. Go practice. Yes sir. My clones chanted, each of them giving me a mock salute before running off to do what they'd been told to do. I watched them avenue with a small feeling of satisfaction. You know what, fine. Don't tell me anything. Clarice suddenly yelled at me, making me jump a bit. She's a scary girl. It's not like I might need to know what's going on or anything like that. She yelled as she stormed off. I watched her go, silently wondering what I'd done to anger her. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.